My father slammed his fist onto the mahogany dining table, making the fine china rattle. "Do not you dare try to steal your sister's accomplishments, Aaliyah. You should be on your knees thanking Dominique for keeping this family afloat with her $9,000 monthly contribution. Instead, you sit here with your jealousy and your cheap little gifts." I opened my mouth to scream that the money came from my bank account, not hers, but my mother cut me off with a look of pure disgust. "If you cannot be happy for your sister, then leave. We do not need your negative energy here." I looked at Dominique, who was smirking behind her wine glass, and then at her husband, Hunter, who shook his head at me like I was a disappointed toddler. "Okay," I thought. "You want to live on Dominique's money. Let us see how far that gets you." I reached into my pocket, unlocked my phone, and canceled the recurring transfer. That was the moment the Vance family dynasty began to crumble, and I had the best seat in the house to watch it burn. Before I tell you how I brought down my own family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the invisible child who was actually paying for everything. My name is Aaliyah Vance, and at 30 years old, I am what my family calls a failure. I drive a 5-year-old Honda Civic, I wear hoodies instead of designer suits, and I work from home. To my parents, Otis and Patricia Vance, prominent members of the Atlanta Black elite, I am an embarrassment. They tell their friends at the country club that I am finding myself or doing some freelance typing work. What they do not know is that I am one of the most sought-after ghostwriters in the publishing industry. I have written memoirs for Fortune 500 CEOs and tech moguls. My net worth sits comfortably in the millions, but I keep my mouth shut and my head down. My sister Dominique, on the other hand, is the star. 2 years older, gorgeous, and married to Hunter, a white marketing consultant who uses buzzwords like synergy and disruption, but has not disrupted anything other than my patience. The nightmare began last Thursday at our annual Thanksgiving dinner. My parents live in a sprawling estate in Buckhead, the kind with columns out front and a driveway long enough to land a plane. I arrived on time helping the catering staff set up because my mother thinks manual labor is beneath her. 2 hours late, a rented Porsche Panamera screeched into the driveway. Dominique and Hunter spilled out looking like a magazine cover. Dominique wore a gold sequined dress that cost more than my car, and Hunter was in a custom suit that was a little too tight. They swept into the dining room without an apology. "Sorry we are late, Mom," Dominique breezed, kissing the air next to my mother's cheek. "We were closing a massive deal with a supplier in Dubai. It is exhausting being at the top." My mother, Patricia, practically melted. "Oh, my poor baby. You work too hard for this family. Sit down, let Aaliyah get you a drink." I poured the wine because that is my role. The invisible servant. We sat down to dinner, and the air was thick with the smell of roasted turkey and expensive perfume. Then came the gift exchange. It is a Vance family tradition to exchange tokens of gratitude before we eat. I went first. My hands were shaking slightly as I handed my parents a leather-bound book. For the past 6 months, I had tracked down and restored old photos of my grandparents, the ones destroyed in a basement flood years ago. I had spent thousands on restoration experts to digitize and recolor them. "Mom, Dad," I said softly, "I know how much you missed those albums. I hope this brings some memories back." My father flipped through 2 pages, glanced at it, and set it aside next to the butter dish. "That is nice, Aaliyah. Good to see you have so much free time on your hands for arts and crafts." Hunter chuckled, taking a sip of his wine. "It is cute. Very quaint. It shows you have a good heart, Aaliyah, even if your wallet is a bit light." Then it was Dominique's turn. She produced a small green velvet box and slid it across the table. My father opened it and gasped. Inside was a gold Rolex day date. "Happy Thanksgiving," Daddy Dominique beamed. "And for Mom, a spa weekend at the St. Regis. Just a little something from the business profits." My mother teared up, clutching Dominique's hand. "Oh, honey, this is too much. You are too generous." That is when she said it. The sentence that snapped the final thread of my patience. "Thank God for you, Dominique," my mother said, wiping her eyes. I do not know what we would do without that $9,000 you send us every month. It keeps this house running. It allows your father and me to retire with dignity." She turned to me, her eyes hardening. "Aaliyah, you really should learn from your sister. She understands duty. She understands success. You could at least try to contribute something instead of just taking up space." The room went silent. My blood ran cold. $9,000. That was exactly the amount I set up for automatic transfer 3 years ago. I sent it to a family trust account that Dominique claimed she managed for tax purposes. She had told me it was the best way to help mom and dad without embarrassing them with my charity. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Wait a minute," I said, my voice trembling. "Mom, Dominique does not send that money. I do. That transfer comes from my earnings. Dominique just passes it along." The laughter that followed was humiliating. Hunter actually slapped the table, he was laughing so hard. "Oh, that is rich," he said. "You?" "The freelancer." "Aaliyah, do not embarrass yourself." Dominique did not even look at me. She just examined her manicured nails. "Aaliyah, stop. We know you want to feel important, but lying isn't the way." I looked at my father, begging him to see the truth. "Dad, look at the bank statements. Look at the source." That was when he slammed his fist and shouted at me to shut up. That was when he called me ungrateful. That was when he told me to leave if I could not worship his golden child. I stared at them, my mother looking at me with disdain, my father red-faced with anger, Hunter smug and arrogant, and Dominique wearing a smile that said she had won. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need to use the restroom." I did not go to the restroom. I went to the kitchen where Dominique had gone to refill her wineglass away from the prying eyes of the guests. I cornered her by the sub-zero fridge. "You need to tell them the truth, Dominique," I hissed. "You are taking credit for my money. You bought that Rolex with the credit card I pay off every month." Dominique turned slowly, her smile gone. Her face was cold, calculating. "Grow up, Aaliyah. Mom and Dad need a hero. They need to believe their favorite daughter is a success. It breaks their heart to think of you struggling, so I make it easy for them. I am doing you a favor. I am the face of this family. You are just the background noise." She took a step closer, smelling of expensive Chardonnay. "Besides, who are they going to believe, me with the image and the lifestyle, or you in your hoodie and your sad little car? Keep sending the money, Aaliyah. Keep paying the cards. Because if you stop, you are not hurting me. You are hurting Mom and Dad, and we both know you are too weak to do that." Hunter walked into the kitchen, then sliding his arm around Dominique's waist. "Is everything okay here, babe? Is she bothering you?" "She is just having a moment." Dominique sighed. "Jealousy is a nasty disease." Hunter looked at me with pity. "Listen, Aaliyah. I know it is hard watching us build an empire while you are stuck in a poverty mindset. But do not be toxic. We are family. If you want, I can let you intern for my consulting firm. Unpaid, of course, until you prove your value. But it would be good exposure for you." I looked at the two of them, the parasites. They truly believed I was trapped. They thought my love for my parents was a leash they could yank whenever they wanted cash. "I am not jealous, Hunter," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And Dominique, you are right. I have been weak. But I am not weak anymore." I walked past them out of the kitchen and into the powder room down the hall. I locked the door and leaned against the marble sink, breathing heavily. I pulled out my phone. My hands were not shaking anymore. I opened my banking app. There it was. The scheduled transfer for December 1st. $9,000. Recipient Vance Family Trust. I tapped the transfer. A menu popped up. Edit. Skip. Cancel. My thumb hovered over the word cancel. I thought about my father shouting. I thought about my mother's smirk. I thought about the Rolex on my father's wrist paid for by the ghostwriting royalties of a book about ethical leadership. The irony was suffocating. I pressed cancel. A confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring series?" I pressed. "Yes." Then I opened my credit card app, the black card that I had added Dominique to as an authorized user for emergencies only. The balance was sitting at $22,000. I went to manage users. I selected Dominique Vance. I hit remove user. I put my phone back in my pocket. I did not say goodbye. I walked out the front door, got into my Honda Civic, and drove away from the mansion. For the first time in my life, I did not feel small. I felt like a detonator. The fallout began exactly 5 days later. December 1st. I was at a day spa in Buckhead, getting a hot stone massage. My phone was on silent, buried deep in my bag. I had decided to treat myself to the package my mother had wanted Dominique to buy for her. When I finally checked my phone 3 hours later, I had 47 missed calls. 12 from Dominique, 20 from my mother, 15 from my father, and a string of text messages that ranged from confused to frantic. The first text was from Dominique at 8:00 a.m. "Hey, just checking the accounts. The transfer hasn't hit yet. Probably just a bank delay, right? Let me know when you push it through." At 9:30 a.m., another from Dominique. "Aaliyah, answer your phone. The mortgage autopay is set for noon. You know how Dad gets about late fees. Fix this." At 11:00 a.m., my mother texted, "Aaliyah, your sister says there is a glitch with your bank. Why are you so irresponsible? You are stressing her out. Call her immediately." By 1:00 p.m., the tone had shifted. This was from Hunter. "Stop playing games, Aaliyah. We are at the dealership trying to pick up the new Range Rover and the card was declined. You are embarrassing us. Turn it back on now." I sat in the spa lounge sipping cucumber water and read the messages like I was reading a novel. They were panicking, they were drowning, and they still thought they could command me. I did not reply to a single message. I simply blocked Hunter's number, muted my parents' notifications, and ordered a glass of champagne. But the real drama happened that evening. I have a friend, Sarah, who works at the upscale grocery store where my mother insists on shopping. She called me at 6:00 p.m. trying to stifle a laugh. "Aaliyah, you are not going to believe this," Sarah whispered. "Your mom and Dominique are at register 4. "What is happening?" I asked, swirling my glass. "Dominique is screaming at the cashier," Sarah said. "Her card got declined." Then she tried another one. Declined. "Your mom tried to write a check, but the system flagged it because apparently their joint account is overdrawn. There is a line of people behind them, Aaliyah. It is the church crowd. Mrs. Johnson is right behind them watching the whole thing." I closed my eyes and imagined the scene. My mother, who cared more about appearances than breathing, being humiliated in front of the church gossip. Dominique, the Golden Child's CEO, unable to buy organic kale. "What did they do?" I asked. "Hunter had to come in and pay with cash." Sarah giggled. "But he did not have enough for the Wagyu beef or the wine. They had to put half the cart back. Your mom looks like she is about to faint. Dominique is yelling about suing the bank for a system error." I thanked Sarah and hung up. This was just the beginning. They thought it was a glitch. They thought it was a mistake. They had no idea that the Bank of Aaliyah was closed forever. That night, alone in my quiet, peaceful apartment, I slept better than I had in 30 years. But I knew the storm was coming. They would not take this lying down. They would come for me, and they would come fighting dirty. I was counting on it. Because I had one more secret weapon they didn't know about. The house they lived in, the sanctuary of their status, didn't belong to who they thought it did. But that is a story for the next part. The air inside the Gucci boutique at Phipps Plaza smelled of expensive leather and curated exclusivity. It was a scent that Dominique Vance considered her natural habitat. She strutted through the glass doors, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floor, flanked by her two closest friends, or rather her two closest competitors, Tiffany and Chloe. They were the kind of friends who smiled to your face while scanning your outfit for last season's clearance items. Dominique knew this game well, and today she intended to win. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses even though they were indoors, and pointed a manicured finger at a Dionysus handbag displayed on a velvet pedestal. It was python skin rare, and carried a price tag that could feed a family of 4 for 6 months. "I will take that one," Dominique announced loudly enough for the other shoppers to hear. "And the matching belt. Actually, throw in those loafers for Hunter too. He has been working so hard on the merger he deserves a treat." Tiffany raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "A merger? I thought Hunter was just consulting for that startup. The one that sells flavored toothpicks." Dominique laughed, a practiced hollow sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Oh, Tiffany, that was months ago. Hunter is moving major assets now. We are looking at a penthouse in Buckhead. You know we need more space for the art collection." She was lying, of course. There was no art collection unless you counted the framed motivational posters Hunter bought online. But the lie tasted sweet. It tasted like power. For years, she had maintained this image using the safety net of the Vance family trust, which was in reality the bank of Aaliyah. Dominique had convinced herself that the money appearing in the account every month was rightfully hers, a cosmic reward for being the face of the family. She had forgotten that the faucet had a handle and someone else was holding it. The sales associate, a young man with a sharp suit and a sharper gaze, brought the items to the counter. He handled the bag with white gloves, treating it with more respect than Dominique treated her own parents. "Excellent choice, Mrs. Vance," he said smoothly. "Your total comes to $8,450. Dominique did not even flinch. She reached into her purse and pulled out the heavy black American Express card. It was the card that defined her. The card that said she was important. She slapped it onto the glass counter with a flourish. "Run it as credit," she said, turning back to Chloe to continue their conversation about an upcoming charity gala she had no intention of actually donating to. The associate inserted the card. There was a moment of silence. Then a sharp, dissonant beep cut through the quiet store. Dominique ignored it, assuming the machine was just processing. She kept talking. "So, I told the event planner if the hydrangeas are not imported from Holland, do not even bother unlocking the doors." Mrs. Vance, the associate, said, his voice dropping an octave. A professional whisper designed to minimize embarrassment, which somehow made it worse. The card was declined. Dominique froze. The smile stayed plastered on her face, but her eyes darted to Tiffany and Chloe. They had stopped looking at scarves and were now watching her with shark-like intensity. "Don't be silly," Dominique scoffed, waving her hand. "It is probably a security hold. We just booked tickets to the Maldives for next week. Run it again." The associate nodded politely and tried again. He waited. Dominique held her breath. Beep. Declined. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The air conditioning suddenly felt freezing. Dominique could feel the sweat prickling at her hairline under her wig. "Do you have another form of payment?" the associate asked, his smile becoming tight. I must have grabbed the wrong card," Dominique stammered. She dug through her purse, her hands shaking. She pulled out a Visa. This was the backup card. The one linked to the joint account she shared with Hunter. The account that Aaliyah used to top up whenever they overspent. "Try this one," she said, her voice sounding thin. Beep. Declined. Tiffany stepped closer, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Dom, is everything okay? Do you want me to cover it? I know how tricky these bank transfers can be when cash flow is tight." The word tight hung in the air like a slap. Dominique felt her face burning. The humiliation was physical, a tightening in her chest. She could not let Tiffany pay. That would be admitting defeat. That would be admitting she was not the queen bee. "No, absolutely not," Dominique snapped. "It is obviously a system error. Their machine is broken. Call Hunter. He is just around the corner at the Apple store." She dialed her husband with trembling fingers. When he answered, she hissed into the phone. "Get to Gucci. Now! Bring your corporate card." Hunter arrived 3 minutes later, looking out of breath and annoyed. He was wearing his signature Bluetooth earpiece, trying to look important. "What is going on, babe? I was in the middle of a call." "Just pay for the bag," Dominique whispered furiously. "The bank locked my cards. Probably identity theft. Someone is trying to hack us because we are high-profile targets." Hunter rolled his eyes but puffed out his chest. He pulled out his wallet and produced a platinum card. He flashed a smile at Tiffany and Chloe. Ladies, sorry for the delay. You know how it is. High security clearance on our accounts. Sometimes the bank gets a little too protective of our assets. He handed the card to the associate with a wink. Keep the receipt. It is a business expense. The associate took the card. He looked tired. He inserted it. Dominique closed her eyes. Please. She prayed to a god she only spoke to when she wanted things. Please let it go through. I will go to church on Sunday. I will be nice to Mom. Just let it go through. Beep. Declined. Do not honor. The machine printed out a tiny slip of paper. The associate read it and looked up, his face devoid of sympathy. Sir, the bank has requested that I confiscate this card. What? Hunter shouted, his cool facade shattering instantly. Give me that back. Do you know who I am? I know that this card has been reported lost or stolen, or the account has been closed with a significant outstanding balance, the associate said, his voice icy. I cannot return it, and I am going to have to ask you to leave before I call security. Tiffany and Chloe were not even pretending to look away anymore. They were exchanging glances, barely suppressing their glee. This was the best entertainment they had seen all year. Dominique felt the world tilting. It was not just a declined card. It was a rejection of her entire existence. The illusion she had crafted so carefully was dissolving under the fluorescent lights of a shopping mall. Hunter snatched the bag from the counter, but the associate was faster, pulling it back. Sir, do not touch the merchandise. Fine, Hunter yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. Keep your cheap bag. We are taking our business elsewhere. Come on, Dominique. We are not staying in this dump. Dominique grabbed her purse, keeping her head down, shielding her face as if dodging paparazzi. She could feel the eyes of every person in the store on her back. She could hear Tiffany whispering to Chloe. Did you see that confiscated? They are broke? They are actually broke. They hurried out of the store, the glass doors sliding shut behind them, with a finality that felt like a prison sentence. They walked fast, almost running, until they reached the parking lot. They did not speak until they were inside the safety of their leased SUV. What the hell just happened? Dominique screamed, her voice cracking. Why did the cards decline? Why did you let them humiliate me? Hunter slammed his hands against the steering wheel. Me. You called me. My card is linked to the family trust account, the one your sister manages. Aaliyah. Dominique breathed the name like a curse. It had to be her. It was the only explanation. But how Aaliyah was a doormat? Aaliyah was the quiet one who sat in the corner and fixed their computer problems. Aaliyah did not have the guts to cut them off. She hacked us, Dominique said, her eyes widening with a mix of rage and delusion. That little witch hacked our accounts. She is trying to steal our money. Hunter started the engine roaring to life. We are going to your parents' house. Now, she is going to pay for this. I am going to sue her for every penny she has. The drive to the Vance estate was a blur of anger. Dominique spent the ride refreshing her banking app, but every time she tried to log in, she got an error message. User access revoked. Contact administrator. She was not the administrator. She never had been. She realized with a sinking feeling that she did not even know the passwords. Aaliyah had always set everything up. Aaliyah handled the technical side because it was boring. Dominique realized now that it wasn't boring. It was control. When they burst into her parents' house, Otis and Patricia were sitting in the living room drinking tea. The house was hot, uncomfortably hot. Why is the air conditioning off? Dominique demanded, throwing her purse onto the sofa. Patricia fanned herself with a magazine. The power company is having some maintenance issues in the area, dear. It has been off for an hour. But never mind that. Look at you. Did you get the bag? Dominique burst into tears. It was an ugly, loud sound. No, I did not get the bag. Aaliyah humiliated me. She froze the accounts. Mom. She hacked into the system and froze everything. Hunter's card got confiscated. My friends were watching. Otis stood up, his face darkening. What do you mean? She froze the accounts? That is your money. That is the family money. She is jealous, Dominique screamed, pacing the room like a caged animal. She is jealous because I am successful, and she is nothing. She wants to ruin my reputation. She knows I had a business meeting with those ladies and she sabotaged me. Hunter chimed in, pouring fuel on the fire. It is criminal, Otis. It is financial abuse. She is holding our assets hostage because she is bitter about Thanksgiving. You need to call her and demand she release the funds immediately. We have bills due tomorrow. Patricia looked horrified. How could she do this to her own sister, after everything you have done for her, after you let her live in our shadow all these years? Dominique wiped her eyes, her mascara smudged. She does not care about us. She wants to see us fail. She wants to see me beg. Well, I am not begging. Dad, you have to fix this. You have to make her fix it. Otis walked over to the landline phone. His jaw was set in a hard line. Do not worry, Princess. This ends now. I am going to call that ungrateful girl and remind her who owns this family. But as Otis dialed the number, Dominique felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. Because for the first time she remembered the look in Aaliyah's eyes at Thanksgiving. It wasn't the look of a victim. It was the look of someone who had already pressed the button and was just waiting for the explosion. And the explosion had just begun. Because what Dominique did not know was that the power outage wasn't maintenance. And the declined card wasn't a glitch. It was a systematic dismantling of her life, and she had just walked into the next trap. The following Saturday afternoon was meant to be my mother's crowning glory of the season. Patricia Vance had spent weeks organizing what she called the Midsummer High Tea for the most influential women in our gated community. These were not just neighbors. These were the gatekeepers of Atlanta society. Women like Mrs. Johnson, whose husband owned half the car dealerships in the state, and Mrs. Gable, who sat on the board of every charity that mattered. To my mother, their approval was oxygen. She had decorated the living room with fresh white lilies imported from Ecuador, their scent heavy and sweet in the air. The grand crystal chandelier sparkled above the table, which was laden with silver platters of cucumber sandwiches, scones with clotted cream, and petite fours that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The central air conditioning was humming a low, steady bass note, keeping the sprawling mansion at a crisp 68 degrees, a necessary luxury against the brutal Atlanta heatwave outside. It was 98 degrees in the shade with humidity so thick you could practically drink the air. But inside the Vance estate, it was cool, calm, and expensive. I know all of this because my mother had posted 14 photos to her Facebook story before the first guest even arrived, captioning them with phrases like blessed and legacy. I was not there, of course. I was sitting in my air-conditioned home office 10 miles away, watching a movie and eating popcorn. But I knew exactly what was about to happen. You see, when I handled the family finances, I had set all the utilities to autopay from my personal account. The electric bill for a house that size ran nearly $800 a month in the summer. When I cut the financial cord on Thanksgiving, I did not just stop the cash transfers. I canceled the utility autopays too. I had ignored the 3 warning emails from the power company that had landed in my inbox over the last 90 days. I figured since Dominique was the new head of the household, she surely would have noticed the bright red past due notices that arrived in the physical mail. Unless, of course, she was too busy posing for Instagram to check the mailbox. Back at the mansion, the tea party was in full swing. My mother was holding court, pouring Earl Grey from her grandmother's silver teapot. She was in the middle of a story about Dominique's latest fictitious business triumph. You know, my mother said, her voice dripping with pride. Dominique is just exhausted. She is closing a deal to acquire a boutique hotel in Savannah. The struggle of managing so much capital is real, ladies. But she insists on taking care of us. She says, Mom, you and Dad served us for years now. Let me pamper you. Mrs. Johnson took a delicate sip of her tea. her eyes narrowing slightly over the rim of the cup. That is wonderful, Patricia. It is so rare to see young people these days with such liquidity. Although I did hear a rumor that she had some trouble with her card at Gucci the other day. My niece was working at the makeup counter across the hall. My mother's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. Oh, that. Just a security precaution. When you move as much money as we do, the banks get skittish. It was resolved immediately. In fact, Hunter bought her a new bracelet just to apologize for the inconvenience. The ladies nodded politely, though the skepticism in the room was palpable. They were sharks, and they could smell blood. But before anyone could press further, it happened. It started with a sound. A heavy mechanical clunk from the basement, followed by a descending whine as the massive HVAC units outside powered down. Then the lights. The crystal chandelier flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The pot lights in the ceiling died. The soft jazz music playing from the surround sound speakers cut out abruptly, leaving a sudden ringing silence. The room plunged into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the harsh sunlight streaming through the heavy drapes. "Oh my," Mrs. Gable gasped, placing a hand on her pearls. "What happened?" My mother laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound that fooled no one. "Oh, it must be the grid. You know how the infrastructure is in this heat. I am sure the whole neighborhood is down." She stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. But as she looked out, the lie dissolved. The streetlights were off. Yes, but the house directly across the street, the massive estate belonging to the CEO of Coca-Cola, was glowing with lights. She could see the blue flicker of a television in their living room. The house to the left had their sprinklers running. It was just the Vance house, a dark, silent island in a sea of power. "That is strange." Mrs. Johnson noted, her voice lacking any real concern. "It seems to be isolated to your property, Patricia." My mother felt a trickle of sweat begin to form at the nape of her neck. The house, built like a fortress with thick insulation, began to trap the heat immediately. Without the air circulation, the air grew stagnant and heavy within minutes. "I am sure it is just a blown fuse," my mother said, fanning herself with a linen napkin. "Otis. Otis, come down here." My father shuffled into the living room. He had been in his study, probably looking at old photos of his glory days. "What is it, Patricia?" "The game just turned off." "The power is out, Otis," she hissed, tilting her head toward the guests. "Check the breaker box." I watched the clock on my wall. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. The temperature outside was peaking. Inside that house, the temperature was climbing rapidly. 10 minutes passed. The guests sat in the darkening room, fanning themselves. The ice in their glasses melted. The cucumber sandwiches began to curl at the edges. The conversation had stalled. Otis returned, his shirt stained with sweat. "The breakers are fine, Patricia. Everything is switched on." "It must be the line." "Call them," my mother snapped, losing her composure. "Call the power company right now. We have guests." Otis pulled out his cell phone and put it on speaker, his hands shaking slightly. He dialed the customer service number. The automated voice filled the silent room loud and clear. "Thank you for calling Georgia Power. To make a payment, press 1. For outage information, press 2. Otis pressed 2. The voice continued, cheerful and robotic. "We show no reported outages in your area. If your power is out, please check your breaker panel. If your service has been disconnected for non-payment, please press 3 to speak with a representative." The room went dead silent. The phrase non-payment hung in the heavy hot air like a bad smell. Mrs. Johnson exchanged a look with Mrs. Gable, a look that said, "I knew it." "Otis, turn off the speaker," my mother whispered frantically. But my father, flustered and not good with technology, fumbled the phone. He pressed 0 instead. "Please hold for the next available representative." While they waited, the heat intensified. My mother's perfectly set hair began to droop. Her foundation started to separate on her skin. The smell of the expensive lilies turned cloying and suffocating in the heat. Finally, a human voice came on the line. "Thank you for holding. I see you are calling about the account for 12 Oakwood Drive. Am I speaking with Mr. Vance? Yes, Otis barked, trying to sound authoritative. My power is out. Fix it immediately. I have important guests here. Sir, the representative said, her voice calm and professional, totally undercutting his anger. Your service was suspended this morning due to non-payment. The last payment received on this account was 90 days ago. 90 days, Otis shouted. That is impossible. My daughter pays the bills. She sends money every month. Sir, the account is in arrears of $2,400. We sent 3 certified letters and multiple emails. To restore service, the full balance plus a reconnection fee of $200 must be paid immediately. My mother sank into the sofa, her face pale beneath the melting makeup. $2,000. The guests heard every word. Otis, fix it, she whispered. Just pay them. But Otis hesitated. And in that hesitation, the truth revealed itself to everyone in the room. He did not have the money ready. He did not have a card he could just read off. I need to find my wallet, Otis stammered. I will call you back. He hung up. The silence that followed was excruciating. It was broken by the sound of Mrs. Johnson standing up. Her silk dress rustled loudly. Well, Patricia, she said, smoothing her skirt. It has been lovely, but I really must be going. The heat gives me terrible migraines. Oh, me too, Mrs. Gable chimed in, standing up so fast she almost knocked over her chair. And I think I left my dog outside. I simply must rush. No, please stay, my mother pleaded, standing up. We will have it back on in 5 minutes. It is just a clerical error. Dominique must have forgotten to switch the accounts over when she took charge. She is so busy with the hotel deal. The hotel deal, Mrs. Johnson repeated, her tone dripping with pity. Of course. We'll give her our best. And good luck with the clerical error. They filed out of the house, not even waiting for the valet. They walked to their cars in the blazing sun just to escape the suffocation of the Vance mansion. As the front door closed, my mother collapsed onto the sofa and burst into tears. Otis stared at the phone in his hand. $2,400, Patricia. Where are we going to get $2,400 right now? Call Dominique, my mother shrieked. Call her right now. She has the money. She has millions. Otis dialed Dominique. It went to voicemail. He dialed Hunter. Voicemail. They are probably in a meeting. My mother sobbed, trying to cling to the lie. A very important meeting. Otis looked at her, and for the first time I think he truly saw her delusion. Or maybe he just felt the sweat running down his back and realized that pride does not keep the lights on. He walked over to the antique desk in the corner. He unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out a small red passbook. It was their emergency retirement fund. The money they had sworn never to touch, the money meant for medical emergencies or funeral costs. He picked up the phone again. He dialed the power company. And with a voice that sounded 10 years older, he read off the routing number from the savings account. 30 minutes later, the lights flickered back on. The air conditioning groaned to life, pushing cool air into the sweltering room. But the damage was done. The atmosphere in the house had changed permanently. The illusion of effortless wealth had been shattered in front of the people who mattered most to my mother. And worse, a seed of doubt had been planted in my father's mind. A seed that I had watered carefully. If Dominique was so rich, if she was sending $9,000 a month, why was the power bill unpaid for 3 months? Why did the math not add up? My mother sat in the cooling room, staring at the wilted lilies. She wiped a smudge of mascara from her cheek. She must have just missed the bill, Patricia whispered to herself. She is a CEO. CEOs do not handle electric bills. It is Aaliyah's fault. Aaliyah should have reminded her, but her voice lacked conviction. The doubt was there, gnawing at her. That evening, when Dominique finally answered her phone, she was manic. Mom, I am so sorry I missed your call. I was negotiating with a supplier in Tokyo. What is wrong? My mother held the phone tight. Dominique, the lights went out. The power company said the bill had not been paid in 3 months. Your father had to use his savings. There was a long pause on the other end. Oh my God, Dominique said, her voice pitching up into a performative gasp. That is Aaliyah. I told her to forward all the utility notices to my assistant. She must have hidden them. She is trying to sabotage me, Mom. She knew you were having a party. She wants you to look bad. Yes, my mother said, latching onto the excuse like a lifeline. Yes, that must be it. That spiteful girl. But send the money to Dad. Okay, sweetie. Just transfer the 2,000 back to his account. He is worried. Of course, Dominique chirped. I will wire it first thing Monday morning. The international markets are closed for the weekend, so my liquid assets are tied up until the opening bell. But do not worry, it is handled. My mother hung up and looked at my father. She says she will send it Monday. It was Aaliyah's fault. Otis looked at the cooling vents, his face grim. He did not say anything. But he went to his study and did something he had not done in years. He opened the filing cabinet where he kept the old bank records. He started looking for the transfer receipts. He started looking for the paper trail. He was beginning to realize that the trail did not lead to Dominique. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my cool lit office, watching the notifications on my phone. I saw the alert that my parents' savings account had been accessed. I saw the utility company mark the bill as paid. I took a sip of my iced tea. Phase 1 was complete. They were embarrassed. They were financially bleeding. And suspicion was taking root. But I was not done. The power outage was just a nuisance. The real blow was coming next. Because while Dominique was busy making up excuses about international markets, she had forgotten one very important thing. The lease on her flashy downtown office space was also in my name, and the rent was due on Tuesday. Let us see how a CEO runs a business without an office. If you know anything about the Black elite in Atlanta, you know that First Sunday at the Cathedral is not just a religious service. It is a runway show. It is a networking event. It is a battlefield where status is measured by the size of your hat and the brand of your sedan. For my parents, Otis and Patricia Vance Church was the grand stage where they performed the weekly play of their perfect life. And this particular Sunday was their most desperate performance yet. After the humiliation at Gucci and the disaster of the power outage, my mother was determined to regain control of the narrative. She had dressed Dominique in a white Chanel suit that I knew for a fact was bought on a credit card that was days away from being maxed out. My father wore his best three-piece suit, despite the humid 90-degree heat, trying to project an image of unshakable stability. Hunter, my brother-in-law, was sweating profusely in a linen blazer, constantly checking his phone, as if waiting for a business call that would save them from the encroaching darkness. I arrived separately, of course. I parked my matte black Mercedes G-Wagon in the far back lot behind the rows of Lexuses and Cadillacs. With my tinted windows rolled up and the air conditioning humming at a cool 65 degrees, I was invisible. I was just another expensive car in a sea of wealth. But unlike the least illusions parked in the front row, my title was sitting in a fireproof safe in my apartment. I watched them walk in. They held their heads high, smiling at the deacons waving to the choir director. My mother linked arms with Dominique, parading her like a prize pony. They were trying so hard to look like the royal family of Buckhead. They had no idea that the executioner was already waiting for them in the parking lot. The service was long. I listened to it via the live stream on my phone while I sipped a vanilla latte. The pastor preached about humility. He preached about the dangers of building your house on sand. I laughed softly to myself. My family had built their house on my bank account, and the sand was shifting fast. Around 1 o'clock, the service ended. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the congregation spilled out into the blinding Georgia sun. This was the moment my mother lived for. The slow walk to the car, the casual conversations on the steps, the opportunity to be seen. I sat up straighter in my seat. I saw the truck before they did. It was a massive flatbed tow truck idling aggressively right in the front row of the VIP parking section. It was blocking the exit path of the pristine white Porsche Panamera that Dominique and Hunter had leased 6 months ago. The Porsche that they claimed they bought with cash from a tech startup dividend. The driver of the tow truck was a man who clearly did not care about social standing. He was wearing a neon yellow vest and chewing on a toothpick. He was already hooking the chains to the Porsche's front axle when my family reached the bottom of the steps. I saw the moment Dominique registered what was happening. She stopped mid-sentence. Her hand flew to her mouth. My mother froze like a statue, her smile dropping instantly into a mask of horror. Then came the scream. "Hey, hey, get away from my car!" It was Hunter. He sprinted down the steps, his linen blazer flapping behind him. He looked ridiculous, like a frantic bird. He ran right up to the tow truck driver's chest, puffed out face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "What do you think you are doing?" Hunter shouted, pointing a finger in the driver's face. "Unhook this car immediately." "Do you know whose car this is? This is a Vance family vehicle." The driver didn't even stop cranking the winch. He looked Hunter up and down with bored eyes. "I have a repossession order here for a 2023 Porsche Panamera, registered to Dominique and Hunter Vance. 90 days delinquent on payments. Lessor is demanding immediate return of the asset." Liar, Hunter screamed. He grabbed the driver's arm. The crowd on the church steps had stopped moving. Hundreds of eyes were now glued to the scene. The pastor had stopped shaking hands. The choir members were leaning over the railing. Dominique rushed forward, her heels clacking on the asphalt. "Hunter, tell him we paid it. It is a bank error." She turned to the driver, flashing her most charming, manipulative smile. "Sir, there must be a misunderstanding. My assistant handles the lease payments. The wire transfer probably just got stuck over the weekend. If you unhook the car, I can write you a personal check right now for the trouble." The driver laughed. A dry, harsh sound. "Lady, I do not want your check. The leasing company does not want your check. They want the car. You are 3 months behind, and frankly, based on the notes in this file, your credit score is lower than the temperature in hell. Now step back before you get hurt." Hunter lost it. The shame was too much. The eyes of the community were burning holes in his back. Mrs. Johnson was standing right there, clutching her handbag, whispering furiously to her husband. Hunter needed to assert dominance. He needed to be the man. He shoved the driver. It was a mistake, a massive, clumsy mistake. "You are stealing my property," Hunter yelled, swinging a wild, uncoordinated punch that missed the driver by a foot. The driver did not flinch. He simply stepped back, raised his hands in a defensive posture, and let Hunter trip over his own feet. Hunter scrambled up, looking deranged, and lunged again. That was when the phones came out. I watched from my G-Wagon as 50 smartphones went up in the air simultaneously. The younger members of the congregation, the teenagers in their Sunday suits, were recording everything. I could see the flashes. I could see the live streams starting. "World star," someone shouted from the back of the crowd. The driver easily sidestepped Hunter again and pinned him against the side of the tow truck. "Look, buddy," the driver said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am doing my job. You strike me again and I am calling the police. And since you are already losing your car, I am guessing you do not have bail money. So sit down." Hunter slumped against the dirty metal of the truck, defeated. His blazer was torn at the shoulder. His face was slick with sweat and tears. He looked small. He looked broke. Dominique was sobbing now, mascara running down her face, ruining the white Chanel suit. She looked at the crowd, desperate for an ally. "Daddy," she wailed. "Daddy, do something." Otis Vance stood at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at his son-in-law pinned against a tow truck. He looked at his daughter crying in the street. And then he looked at the crowd. He saw the judgment. He saw the whispers. He knew. He knew that if he stepped forward, he would be part of the failure. Otis did not move. He adjusted his tie and looked away, pretending to study the architecture of the church steeple. The tow truck driver finished securing the chains. He hopped into the cab and revved the engine. The diesel fumes blew directly into Hunter's face. With a loud mechanical groan, the Porsche was lifted into the air. The symbol of their success, the vehicle they used to look down on everyone else, was hoisted up like a dead carcass. The truck pulled away, slowly dragging their dignity with it. My family was left standing in the middle of the parking lot, empty-handed. Then came the final twist of the knife. They had ridden together in the Porsche. They had no other car. We were 10 miles from home. I watched as my mother tried to flag down Mrs. Johnson, who had eaten at their table, who had pretended to be their friend for 20 years. Mrs. Johnson saw them coming. She saw Patricia waving frantically, and I watched as Mrs. Johnson tapped her husband on the shoulder, got into her Cadillac Escalade, and locked the doors. She drove right past them, staring straight ahead. The isolation was absolute. I took a sip of my coffee. It was still warm. I checked my phone. The video of Hunter fighting the repo man was already trending on Twitter locally. The caption read, "Buckhead bougie goes broke." I put the G-Wagon in drive. I could have stopped. I could have rolled down the window and offered them a ride. I had 4 empty seats. I could have saved them from the sweltering heat and the walk of shame. But I remembered Thanksgiving. I remembered being told to find another table. I remembered being told I was negative energy. So I drove past them. I drove slowly, my tires crunching on the gravel. As I passed, I rolled my window down just an inch, just enough for them to see me. Dominique saw me first. Her eyes locked onto mine. She saw the cool leather interior. She saw the peace on my face. She saw the car that I owned, fully paid for, title in hand. "Aaliyah," she screamed, running toward my car. "Aaliyah, stop. We need a ride." I didn't speed up. I didn't slow down. I just kept my consistent pace. I looked at her, gave a small, polite nod, the kind you give to a stranger, and rolled the window back up. I watched in the rearview mirror as she stopped running. She stood there in the dust left by my tires, shrinking smaller and smaller until she was just a white dot in the distance. They would have to call an Uber. But considering their credit cards were declined and their bank accounts were frozen, I wondered how they were going to pay for it. Maybe they could offer the driver a slightly used linen blazer. As I turned onto the main highway, heading back to my quiet, solvency-filled life, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from my father. "Aaliyah, pick up the phone. This has gone too far. We need to talk." I deleted the text without opening it. We didn't need to talk. They needed to talk. I needed to prepare for the next phase, because losing the car was painful, yes. But losing the house, that was going to be fatal. And tomorrow was Monday. The day the bank auditors, my auditors, were scheduled to visit the Vance family residence to inspect the collateral for the defaulted loan. The collateral that was currently filled with furniture bought with stolen money. I turned up the radio. It was a beautiful Sunday. The sun was shining, the air was clear, and for the first time in years, the Vance family was finally living a life they could actually afford, which was effectively nothing. Monday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. I was sitting in my studio apartment, the one my parents believed was my only home. It was a modest 400-square-foot space in a converted warehouse district. I kept this place for appearances. It was filled with cheap IKEA furniture, a futon that doubled as a couch, and a small desk where I pretended to struggle with freelance typing gigs. In reality, I owned the entire building through a shell company, and my actual penthouse was 3 miles away in Midtown. But to the Vance family, this cramped room was proof of my mediocrity. I was sipping an iced matcha latte, reviewing the final draft of a memoir I had written for a Silicon Valley billionaire, when the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was a violent, rhythmic hammering that shook the thin door in its frame. "Aaliyah, open this door right now." It was my mother, Patricia. Her voice was unrecognizable, stripped of its usual polished high society cadence. It was raw, shrill, and laced with hysteria. I didn't rush. I saved my document, closed my laptop, and took a slow breath. I had been expecting this. After the humiliation at the church and the towing of the Porsche, they had no other move. They were cornered animals. When I opened the door, the sight that greeted me was pathetic. My family, the royalty of Buckhead, looked like refugees from a failed gala. My mother's hair was frizzy from the humidity, her eyes swollen red. My father Otis looked gray and defeated, his expensive suit rumpled and sweat-stained. Dominique was behind them, wearing oversized sunglasses to hide her face, but I could see her chin trembling. And Hunter, my brother-in-law, stood with his arms crossed, his blazer torn at the shoulder from his fight with the tow truck driver, radiating toxic aggression. They didn't wait to be invited in. They pushed past me, filling the small room with the smell of stale perfume and desperation. "You are trying to kill us!" my mother screamed, spinning around to face me. She pointed a shaking finger at my face. "You are trying to give your father a heart attack. Are you happy now? Aaliyah, is this what you wanted? To see your family destroyed?" I leaned against the kitchenette counter, crossing my arms. "I am not doing anything, Mom. I am just living my life." Liar Hunter shouted, stepping into my personal space. He loomed over me, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "We know what you did. You locked Dominique out of the accounts. You changed the passwords to the trust. You intercepted the transfers." Dominique finally spoke up, her voice thick with tears. "Just give it back, Aaliyah. Please. I cannot access the funds to get the car back. The bank is calling me every hour. Just unlock the dashboard so I can do my job." It was fascinating to watch. Even now, standing in the wreckage of their own lies, they still clung to the narrative. In their minds, the money was Dominique's. It had to be. Because if it wasn't, their entire worldview would collapse. They truly believed I was just the technical support, the jealous sister, who had changed the administrative settings on Dominique's empire. "I am not the administrator, Dominique," I said calmly. "And there is nothing to unlock. I simply stopped paying your bills." My mother let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She grabbed my father's arm. "Otis, look at her. Look at her face. She is enjoying this. She is stealing your sister's money because she is jealous of her success. She wants us to starve." Otis stepped forward. He looked tired, but his eyes were hard. He was a man who was used to being obeyed, and his authority was the only thing he had left. "Aaliyah, that is enough," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I do not care what petty grievance you have with your sister. You do not endanger the family. You do not humiliate us in public. Now I want you to sit down at that computer, log into the banking portal, and reverse whatever hold you put on the funds. And then you are going to apologize to your sister for the stress you have caused." I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had attended every one of Dominique's piano recitals, but missed my college graduation. "I am not doing that, Dad," I said. Hunter slammed his hand against the wall, making a picture frame rattle. "Do it. Stop playing games. We have bills due today." I reached into my bag, which was sitting on the counter. Dominique flinched, as if she thought I was pulling out a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. I had prepared it weeks ago, waiting for this exact moment. "You want to know where the money is?" I asked. "You want to see the accounts?" I tossed the envelope onto the cheap IKEA coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. "Read it." Dominique lunged for the envelope, trying to grab it before my father could. "No, we do not need to read her fake reports. She forged them, but Otis was faster." He snatched the envelope from the table and ripped it open. He pulled out a stack of papers. They were bank statements. Official certified, notarized bank statements going back 3 years. The room went silent save for the sound of my father shuffling pages. My mother looked over his shoulder, squinting. "What is this? What are we looking at?" I narrated for them. "Look at the top line, Dad. Look at the sender of the monthly transfer. Does it say Vance Family Trust? Does it say Dominique Vance Enterprises?" Otis stared at the paper. His eyes narrowed. He traced the line with his finger. Sender Aaliyah Vance LLC, source of funds royalties and intellectual property licensing. I pointed to the next page. Look at the credit card payments, the black card you all use. Who is the primary account holder? Otis flipped the page. Primary account holder, Aaliyah Vance. Authorized user Dominique Vance. I watched Dominique. She had retreated to the corner of the room, her back pressed against the wall. She wasn't crying anymore. She was hyperventilating. The gig was up. The curtain had been pulled back. Dad, I said, my voice steady. Dominique hasn't made $1 in 5 years. Her business is a pyramid scheme. She buys inventory she cannot sell and recruits people who quit a month later. The house, the cars, the trips, your retirement, I paid for it. Me. The failure. The freelancer. I have been paying $9,000 a month for 3 years to keep this family from drowning. My mother snatched the papers from my father's hands. She read them frantically, shaking her head. No. No. This is a mistake. Dominique. Tell them it is a mistake. Tell them she typed these up on her computer. Dominique didn't say anything. She just slid down the wall and buried her face in her hands. The silence stretched out heavy and suffocating. I waited. I waited for the apology. I waited for my father to look at me with respect. I waited for my mother to realize she had been worshipping the wrong child. Otis lowered the papers. He looked at Dominique huddled in the corner. Then he looked at me. And then he said the thing that broke my heart for the final time. So what? I blinked. Excuse me. Otis threw the papers back onto the table. So what, Aaliyah? So you made some money. So you got lucky with your little writing gigs. Does that make you better than us? Does that give you the right to cut your sister off at the knees? I stared at him, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. Dad, did you not hear me? She has been lying to you. She has been stealing credit for my work. I have been supporting you, not her. And that is your job, my mother chimed in, suddenly finding her voice again. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any gratitude. You are the single one. You are the one with no children, no responsibilities. Dominique has a husband. She has an image to maintain. She is building a brand. If you have this much money, why shouldn't you help her? Why shouldn't you support the family? Hunter, sensing the tide turning, puffed out his chest again. Exactly. It is called family estate planning, Aaliyah. You are the silent partner. That is your role. You are supposed to be the support system while Dominique handles the public relations. You know she is better with people. You know she is the face of the Vance name. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. I had just proven that I was the millionaire, and they were treating me like a rebellious servant who had forgotten her place. You are unbelievable, I whispered. You do not care that she lied. You do not care that she is a fraud. We care that you are being selfish, Otis shouted, pointing at the door. You have millions. Good. Then pay the power bill, get the car back, and apologize to your sister for exposing her weakness. She is fragile, Aaliyah. She cannot handle stress like you can. You are used to being in the background. You are used to the grind. Dominique is special. She needs protection. My mother nodded vigorously. Your father is right. If you really have this money, then write a check right now. Fix this mess you created. And maybe if you are generous enough, we can forgive you for this stunt. Forgive me, I laughed. It was a dark, bitter sound. You want to forgive me for paying your bills for 3 years? We want you to know your place, Hunter spat. I looked at them. Really, looked at them. I saw the fear behind their eyes. They weren't angry because I was mean. They were angry because I had disrupted the natural order. In their world, Dominique was the queen and I was the worker bee. The fact that the worker bee had all the honey was offensive to them. It didn't matter who earned it. It only mattered who they wanted to shine. I walked over to the door and opened it wide. Get out, I said. My mother gasped. You are kicking your parents out. I am kicking strangers out, I said, because my parents would have been proud of me. My parents would have hugged me and thanked me. I do not know who you people are, but you are trespassing. Otis straightened his tie. He tried to summon his dignity, but he just looked old and foolish. You are making a mistake, Aaliyah. You are going to die alone with your money, and you will have no family left. I looked at Dominique, who was still on the floor. Get up, Dominique. Go with them. Go find another sister to leech off of. Hunter helped her up. She wouldn't look at me. They filed out of the apartment one by one. My mother paused at the doorway, looking at me with pure venom. Do not expect an invite to Christmas, she hissed. I won't, I said. And do not expect the rent check for that house to clear next month. I slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. And then I slid down to the floor and sat there in the silence. I didn't cry. I was done crying. I felt light. I felt empty, but clean. Like a cancer had been cut out of my body, but I knew it wasn't over. My father's ego was bruised. Hunter was desperate, and Dominique was cornered. They wouldn't just walk away, they would try to take what they believed was theirs. I looked at the bank statements scattered on the floor. They thought these were just papers. They didn't know that these were legal documents. And by admitting they knew about the money but demanding I hand it over, they had just given me exactly what I needed for the next phase. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer, Weiss. The bank just flagged an attempt to refinance the mortgage on the family home. They tried to forge your signature as a cosigner. I smiled. They were predictable, and they were walking right into the trap I had set for them. Let them try to steal the house. They were about to find out that I had already bought the debt. The landlord wasn't a bank anymore, the landlord was me. An eviction notice was already in the printer. The silence that followed my eviction notice was short-lived. I had told them to leave. I had opened the door. I had given them a chance to walk away with whatever shreds of dignity they had left. But desperate people do not make rational decisions. And Hunter Vance, my brother-in-law, was the definition of desperate. He was a man who had built his entire identity on a lie. He was the successful consultant, the wealthy husband, the man about town. Without the steady stream of my money funding his lifestyle, he was just a guy with a leased personality and a mountain of debt. And in that moment, looking at me standing defiantly by the door, he snapped. He did not walk out. He slammed the door shut with a force that shook the walls. You think this is funny? Hunter snarled, turning on me. His face was a mask of red, blotchy rage. You think you can just cut us off and laugh? You think you can ruin my marriage? He marched toward me. I backed up instinctively until my hips hit the edge of my desk. The room felt suddenly very small. My mother and father stood frozen by the couch watching. They did not intervene. They did not tell him to stop. In their twisted logic, perhaps they thought I deserved to be frightened. Perhaps they thought fear would loosen the purse strings where guilt had failed. I am not ruining your marriage, Hunter, I said, keeping my voice level despite the pounding in my chest. You ruined it when you married a woman for money she did not have. Now get out of my apartment before I call the police. Police Hunter laughed a wild, unhinged sound. You are going to call the police on family? I do not think so. You are going to sit down at that computer and you are going to make the transfer. Right now. He lunged for the desk. He wasn't aiming for me, not directly. He was aiming for the laptop. The silver MacBook Pro that sat open on the desk, the portal to the bank, accounts he so desperately needed to access. He grabbed the laptop with both hands. I tried to snatch it back, but he shoved me aside with his shoulder. I stumbled, hitting my arm against the wall. Hey, I shouted. That is my property. Put it down. Hunter held the laptop high above his head like a sacrifice or a weapon. I will smash this thing into a million pieces. He screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. I will destroy every piece of electronics in this dump until you give us the money. Do it. Unlock the funds or say goodbye to your precious work. My mother finally spoke up, but not to stop him. She spoke to encourage the madness. Just do what he says, Aaliyah. He is stressed. Do not make him do something he regrets. It was victim blaming at its finest. It was always my fault. Even when a grown man was threatening to destroy my livelihood, it was my stubbornness that was the problem. Hunter's knuckles were white as he gripped the aluminum casing of the computer. I could see the veins bulging in his neck. He was shaking, vibrating with adrenaline and impotence. "I am counting to 3, Hunter yelled. One, I looked at my father. Otis Vance, the patriarch, the protector. He was looking at his shoes. He was letting this happen. 2, Hunter screamed. I braced myself for the sound of shattering glass and metal. I prepared myself to lose months of work, grateful that I had backed everything up to the cloud an hour ago. But the crash never came. Instead, the front door behind Hunter flew open. It didn't just open, it was kicked open. A blur of floral print and fury stepped into the room. It was Grandma Hattie, my father's mother. The woman who had ostensibly been cut off from the family years ago because she refused to adhere to my mother's strict social protocols. She was 80 years old, 5'2", and currently wielding a Louisville Slugger baseball bat that looked almost as big as she was. She didn't look like a fragile old lady, she looked like a warlord in a housecoat. "Drop it," Hattie commanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a death sentence. Hunter froze. He turned slowly, the laptop still held over his head. He looked at the old woman, confused. "Who is that?" My father looked up, his eyes widening. Mama Hattie didn't look at Otis. Her eyes were locked on Hunter like a laser. "I said drop the computer, boy. Or so help me God, I will shatter your kneecaps before you can count to 3. Hunter hesitated. He looked at the bat, then at Hattie's fierce expression. He lowered the laptop slowly, setting it back onto the desk with a clatter. "Who are you?" Hunter asked again, his voice trembling slightly. Hattie stepped further into the room, tapping the bat against the palm of her hand. "I am the woman who is about to end your miserable little charade, and you must be the leech my granddaughter has been feeding for 3 years. She walked right up to him. Hattie had to crane her neck to look him in the eye, but somehow she seemed to tower over him. "You listen to me, you cheap suit-wearing bottom-feeding grifter," Hattie hissed. "If you ever raise your voice at my granddaughter again, if you ever touch a single hair on her head or a single key on her computer, I will ensure you are deported back to that trailer park suburb you crawled out of." Hunter recoiled as if he had been slapped. How do you know where I am from?" Hattie laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "I know everything, boy. I know your father was a used car salesman in Macon. I know you changed your last name when you moved to Atlanta to sound more aristocratic. And I know you have about $12 in your checking account right now. You think because I am old I am blind." She turned her gaze to my parents. Otis and Patricia were huddled together, looking like children caught stealing cookies. "And you two," Hattie said, shaking her head with profound disappointment. "I raised you better than this, Otis. Standing there watching this outsider threaten your own blood over money." "Mama, you do not understand," Otis stammered. She has compromised the family security. She is withholding funds." Hattie slammed the bat onto the floor with a deafening crack. Silence. "She is withholding her money, her money." "Otis, the money she earned while you were busy playing golf and Patricia was busy climbing social ladders that go nowhere." My mother stepped forward, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Hattie, this is none of your business. You do not even live here. How did you get in? Did you follow us?" Hattie rolled her eyes. She walked over to me and put a protective arm around my shoulder. She smelled of lavender and peppermint, the scent of my childhood safety. "Follow you?" Hattie scoffed. "Patricia, you are as observant as a brick wall." "I live upstairs." The room went quiet. Upstairs, Dominique whispered. She had been silent until now, still recovering from her breakdown. "But you live here in the warehouse district." Hattie winked at me. A subtle, quick movement that only I saw. "I have a nice little arrangement," Hattie said. "The owner of the building lets me stay in the penthouse suite for a very reasonable rate. I was having a lovely nap until I heard you lot screeching like banshees down here." My mother looked around the cramped studio apartment, then up at the ceiling. Penthouse. In this dump. Hattie, you must be confused. This is a converted factory. Aaliyah barely has room for a futon. They missed it. They completely missed it. Hattie had practically handed them the truth on a silver platter. She lived in the penthouse. I lived in the studio. I was the landlord. She was the tenant. But their prejudice was so deep, their assumption of my failure so absolute that they couldn't connect the dots. They just assumed Hattie was senile and living in some attic crawlspace. I do not care what you think of the building, Patricia, Hattie snapped. I care that you are trespassing. Now all of you get out. Before I use this bat for batting practice. Hunter tried to rally one last time. He straightened his torn blazer. You cannot kick us out. We are family, and we are not leaving until we get a check. Hattie moved fast. For an 80-year-old, she moved with terrifying speed. She swung the bat low, sweeping it through the air just inches from Hunter's shins. The wind from the swing hit his pants leg. Hunter yelped and jumped back, tripping over the coffee table and landing hard on his backside. The next swing won't miss, Hattie promised. Otis grabbed Patricia's arm. Come on, we are leaving. Mama has lost her mind. It is not safe here. They scrambled for the door. It was a chaotic, undignified retreat. Hunter crawled to his feet and ran out first, not even waiting for his wife. Dominique followed, sobbing quietly. Otis and Patricia gave me one last look, a mixture of anger and confusion, before backing out the door. Hattie followed them into the hallway, standing guard, until she heard the heavy metal door of the building entrance slam shut downstairs. Only then did she lower the bat. She leaned it against the wall and turned to me. Her fierce expression softened into a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Are you okay, baby girl? She asked softly. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I sank into my desk chair, my legs suddenly feeling like jelly. I am okay, Grandma. Thank you. I thought he was actually going to break it. Hattie chuckled, walking over to the kitchenette to pour herself a glass of water. He wouldn't have dared. He is a coward, Aaliyah. Men like that are all bluster. The moment they face real strength, they fold like cheap lawn chairs. She took a sip of water and looked around my studio. Then she looked up at the ceiling toward her apartment on the top floor. The apartment I had designed specifically for her, with the walk-in tub and the panoramic view of the city. You know, Hattie said thoughtfully, they really are blind. I told them I lived in the penthouse. I practically told them you own the block. And they just couldn't hear it. They hear what they want to hear, I said, rubbing my arm where I had hit the wall. They need me to be the failure. If I am successful, then their whole world stops making sense. Hattie nodded. Well, their world is about to stop making sense anyway. I saw the mail on the counter upstairs, Aaliyah. The bank notices for Otis. The foreclosure warnings. They are in deep. I know, I said. I bought the debt, Grandma. Hattie raised an eyebrow. You did what I bought the mortgage note on the family house. The bank was going to auction it off to a developer. I stepped in through the LLC. I own the paper. Hattie stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, wide grin spread across her face. So when you kick them out, you are really kicking them out. I nodded. And when they realize the new landlord is me, that is going to be the moment. Hattie laughed a full belly-shaking laugh. Lord have mercy. You are dangerous, child. You are quiet, but you are dangerous. I love it. She walked over and kissed my forehead. You rest now. Lock the door. I am going back upstairs to watch my soaps. But if they come back, you know the code to the safe upstairs. I knew. The safe in the penthouse held more than just jewelry. It held the master keys to every unit in the district. It held the deeds. And it held the evidence I had been collecting for years. I will be fine, Grandma, I said. She left, closing the door gently behind her. I locked it, throwing the deadbolt. I looked at my laptop. It was untouched. My work was safe. My money was safe. But outside, the storm was raging. My family had just been chased off by an octogenarian with a baseball bat. They were humiliated, broke, and running out of time. I sat down at my desk and opened a new browser window. I typed in the address for the county clerk's office. I wanted to check the status of the filing. The foreclosure proceedings were processed. The eviction notice was ready to be served. I looked at the calendar. The anniversary party was in 3 days. That was the deadline. They wanted me to pay for the party fine. I would pay for it. I would pay for the venue, the food, and the entertainment. And the entertainment was going to be the most expensive slideshow in history. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. Weiss, I said when he answered. It is Aaliyah. Go ahead and book the country club. And make sure the projector is 4K resolution. I have some very detailed documents I need to display. It was time to end this. Not with a bat, but with the truth. And the truth was going to hurt much more than a swing at the shins. The air in my father's home office was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. It was 2 a.m. on Tuesday. The house was quiet, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that falls over a place when the people inside know they are living on borrowed time. My parents, Otis and Patricia, were upstairs asleep, exhausted from the stress of the weekend. But downstairs in the room where my father kept his most prized possessions, a crime was taking place. I wasn't in the room, of course. I was 5 miles away in my real apartment, the penthouse my family didn't know existed, sitting across from my lawyer, Benjamin Weiss. We were watching the digital trail of their destruction in real time like air traffic controllers, watching 2 planes on a collision course. Back in the study, Dominique was sitting at my father's heavy oak desk. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. Hunter was standing over her, his shadow stretching long across the wall, looking like a vulture waiting for a carcass to stop moving. Just sign it. Dominique Hunter hissed, his voice low and urgent. We do not have time for you to have a moral crisis. The wire has to be initiated by 8:00 a.m. if we want the funds to clear before the anniversary party. Dominique looked down at the document. It was a home equity line of credit application. A second mortgage. They were trying to pull $200,000 of equity out of the house that was already in foreclosure, the house that I secretly owned the debt on. I cannot do this, Hunter. Dominique whispered, tears pricking her eyes. This is Dad's signature. If he finds out, he won't find out. Hunter interrupted, slamming his hand down on the desk, careful to avoid the papers. Listen to me. We take the money, we pay off the car, we pay off the credit cards, and we throw the biggest anniversary party this town has ever seen. We secure the investors at the party, and then we pay this loan back before the first statement even arrives. Dad will never know. We are saving him, Dom. We are saving the family image. It was the same lie they had been telling themselves for years. The lie that the next big deal was just around the corner. The lie that fraud was just a temporary strategy. Dominique took a shaky breath. She looked at the signature line. Applicant Otis Vance. Co-applicant Patricia Vance. She picked up the pen. It was my father's favorite fountain pen, a Mont Blanc he had received for 20 years of service at the bank. The irony was sickening. She was using the symbol of his honest labor to steal the roof over his head. She practiced the signature once on a scrap piece of paper. It was clumsy. Curse it, make it loop more at the end, Hunter critiqued, leaning in. Dad has a flourish on the V. She tried again. Better. Okay, Hunter said. Do it. For us. For your reputation. Do you want to be the woman who got her car repoed at church? Or do you want to be the heiress who saved the day? Dominique closed her eyes. She pressed the pen to the official document. The scratch of the nib against the paper sounded loud in the quiet room. She signed Otis Vance. Then she signed Patricia Vance. There she breathed, dropping the pen as if it were burning hot. It is done. Hunter snatched the papers up immediately. He scanned them, a greedy smile spreading across his face. Perfect. I have the online notary login. My buddy gave me his credentials. We upload this now and the automated system approves it based on the house's estimated value. He sat down at the laptop and began scanning the forged documents. He was humming. He was actually humming a tune while he committed a felony. 5 miles away, a notification pinged on Benjamin Weiss's tablet. Benjamin looked at me over the rim of his glasses. He was a man of few words, a shark in a bespoke suit who had seen every kind of white-collar crime imaginable. But even he looked disgusted. "Here it is," Aaliyah Weiss said, turning the screen toward me. "A rush application for a HELOC on the property. $200,000. Documents just uploaded. Notarized digitally by a remote agent in Florida." I looked at the screen. I saw the signatures. I knew my father's handwriting better than anyone. I knew how he paused before the V. I knew the specific pressure he used. These signatures were forgeries. Good ones, but forgeries. "They are trying to borrow against equity that does not exist," Weiss explained. "Since you bought the non-performing note from the original bank last week, your LLC is the primary lien holder. The system flagged it because any new debt requires your approval as the senior creditor." He hovered his finger over a red button on his screen. "I can block this right now, Aaliyah. I can flag it as fraud, stop the transfer, and have the application rejected. It will save the house from being further encumbered." I stared at the screen. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner. I thought about the way Hunter had looked at me when he threatened to smash my computer. I thought about my mother telling me I was useless. If I stopped them now, what would happen? They would claim it was a misunderstanding. They would say they had verbal permission. It would be a messy family dispute. They would face no real consequences. They would just find another way to bleed my parents dry. "No," I said softly. Weiss raised an eyebrow. "No, do not block it," I said, my voice hardening. "Approve it." Weiss leaned back in his chair. "Aaliyah, do you understand what you are asking? If you approve this, the bank will release the funds to them. They will be stealing $200,000. That is grand larceny. That is wire fraud. That is federal prison time." "Exactly," I said. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The city lights were blurring in the humidity. If I stop them now, they learn nothing. They just think the system failed them again. They need to succeed, Benjamin. They need to think they got away with it. They need to receive the money, spend the money, and dig the hole so deep that they can never climb out. I turned back to him. "Let the payment go through. Let them hang themselves." Weiss nodded slowly. He understood. This wasn't about saving money anymore. It was about surgery, removing the rot. He tapped the screen. Approval granted. "The funds will be wired to the account designated in the application. Dominique Vance's personal checking account. By 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, they will have the cash." Back in the study, Hunter hit the enter key. The screen refreshed. Application approved. Funds dispersed. "Oh my God!" Dominique gasped, clutching her chest. "It worked. Hunter, it actually worked." Hunter grabbed her and spun her around, laughing. I told you I am a genius. We are back in the game, baby. We are going to throw the party of the century." They hugged each other, celebrating their crime. They were celebrating the fact that they had just stolen from their own parents to pay for a party to impress people who didn't care about them. Dominique pulled away, breathless. Okay. We have to be smart. We pay the car lease first, then the credit cards, and we book the caterer. We have to make sure everything looks perfect for the anniversary." And Aaliyah, Hunter asked, a sneer curling his lip. "Forget her," Dominique said, feeling the rush of power returning to her veins. "We do not need her anymore. We have our own capital now. Let her rot in that little studio apartment. When Mom and Dad see what we pull off on Saturday, they will forget she even exists." They didn't know. They didn't know that the capital they were celebrating was a trap. They didn't know that every keystroke had been logged. They didn't know that by initiating that wire transfer across state lines, they had escalated their family drama into a federal investigation. I went home to my studio that morning to keep up appearances. I needed to look defeated. I needed them to think they had won. Wednesday and Thursday passed in a blur of activity. My social media feed was flooded with posts from Dominique. She posted a photo of the recovered Porsche. "God is good. Sometimes you just have to trust the process." Blessed empire building. She posted a photo of a stack of invitations. The Vance legacy continues. Can't wait to celebrate 30 years of Black excellence with the power couple of Atlanta. She even posted a video of herself and Hunter at the jewelry store buying a new diamond necklace for my mother. Just a little token of appreciation for the woman who started it all, she captioned it. I watched it all. I took screenshots of everything. I added them to the folder on my laptop. The folder labeled Exhibit A. On Friday afternoon, the day before the party, I received a text from my father. Aaliyah, your sister has stepped up. She has handled the financial situation. We expect you at the party tomorrow. Do not bring your drama. Just come and support the family. It starts at 6. I stared at the message. Even now, after everything, he was giving the credit to her. He didn't ask where the money came from. He didn't question how she went from broke to flush in 24 hours. He just wanted the result. He wanted the illusion to be restored. I replied with 2 words, I'll be there. I spent Friday night preparing. I wasn't buying a dress. I wasn't booking a hair appointment. I was meeting with a private investigator and forensic accountant. We went over the timeline, the forged deed, the IP address used to sign it, the notary log, the wire transfer receipt showing the money hitting Dominique's account and immediately being spent on luxury goods. We have enough to put them away for 10 years, Aaliyah, the investigator said, closing the file. Are you sure you want to do this at the party? We could just hand this to the FBI on Monday. I looked at the invitation sitting on my desk. It was gold-embossed heavy cardstock. It cost $10 per invite. No, I said. If they are arrested on Monday, my parents will spin it. They will say it was a misunderstanding. They will say the system is attacking successful Black people. They will make Dominique a martyr. I looked the investigator in the eye. I need to kill the lie before I kill the liars. Everyone needs to see it. The church members, the business partners, the neighbors. They need to see exactly who Dominique and Hunter are. The investigator nodded. Cold. Necessary, I corrected. Saturday morning arrived. The day of the golden anniversary. The sky was blue. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day for a public execution. I dressed simply. Black slacks, a silk blouse, low heels. I wasn't going there to be the star. I was going there to be the narrator. I arrived at the country club early. The staff was setting up. I saw the massive floral arrangements. I saw the ice sculpture with my parents' initials. It was grotesque opulence paid for with stolen equity. I found the AV technician in the back of the ballroom. He was a young guy setting up the projector for the tribute video Dominique had prepared. Hey, I said, flashing my most disarming smile. I am the sister. Dominique asked me to bring the updated file for the presentation. She made some last-minute changes to the photos. The tech didn't suspect a thing. Oh, cool. Just plug in the USB drive here. I will load it into the queue. I handed him the drive. It contained 2 files. One was labeled Happy Anniversary. The other was hidden embedded in the code of the first. Make sure you test it, I said. We want it to be perfect. He ran a quick test. The first slide came up a beautiful photo of my parents on their wedding day. Looks great, he said. Perfect, I smiled. Just wait until you see the ending. It is a real showstopper. I walked out of the ballroom and sat on the terrace waiting for the guests to arrive. I watched the valet parking lot fill up with Bentleys and Mercedes. I watched my family arrive in the reclaimed Porsche waving to the crowd like royalty. Dominique looked radiant in a red gown. Hunter looked smug in a new tuxedo. My parents looked relieved, soaking in the adulation, their financial terrors forgotten. They walked right past me on their way in. Glad you made it, Aaliyah, Hunter sneered, leaning in close. Try not to eat too much. This food is expensive. I didn't say anything. I just checked my watch. 2 hours until the speeches. 2 hours until the end of the world. I took a sip of my sparkling water. Enjoy the shrimp, Hunter, I thought. The food in federal prison is significantly less flavorful. The invitation to the family meeting arrived via a text message from my mother that was as cold as it was demanding. Come to the house at 7 o'clock sharp. Do not be late, and do not bring your attitude. We have a proposition for you. I stared at the screen of my phone and felt a dry humor rise in my chest. They had a proposition. After stealing my money for years, trying to destroy my livelihood, and just yesterday committing federal wire fraud to secure a loan against a house I secretly owned the debt on, they wanted to negotiate. I drove to the Buckhead estate with the windows down, letting the warm Atlanta evening air fill the car. I felt strangely calm. It is a specific kind of peace that comes when you know the end of the war is in sight. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the Porsche Panamera was back in its spot, gleaming under the security lights. They had used the stolen bank funds to retrieve it from the impound lot, immediately desperate to restore the facade of their wealth. It was a shiny trophy paid for with a felony. When I walked into the living room, the atmosphere was staged like a courtroom. My father sat in his leather armchair trying to look regal. My mother was perched on the sofa clutching a handkerchief as if she were a grieving widow. Dominique and Hunter sat together on the love seat looking victorious. Dominique had a glass of champagne in her hand, the bubbles rising in the crystal flute. She looked at me with a smirk that said she believed she had won. She believed that with the new loan money in her account, she no longer needed me. She thought she was untouchable. "Sit down." "Aaliyah," my father commanded, pointing to a stiff wooden chair placed in the center of the room. I sat. I crossed my legs and folded my hands in my lap, waiting. "We have discussed your behavior," my mother began, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and performance. "We have discussed the shame you brought upon this family at the church. We have discussed the disrespect you showed your sister and your brother-in-law. You abandoned us. You cut off the support that was your duty to provide, and you tried to humiliate us in front of the entire community." I stayed silent. I let them talk. I wanted to hear the full extent of their delusion. Hunter leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "We know you are jealous, Aaliyah. We know you hate that Dominique is the star of this family. But we are willing to be the bigger people here. We are willing to give you a chance to redeem yourself." "Redeem myself," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes, redeem yourself," my father said sternly. "This Saturday is our 30th wedding anniversary. It is a milestone. It is the most important night of our lives. We are going to celebrate 3 decades of building this family legacy, and we want you to be part of it. But there are conditions." He paused for dramatic effect. Dominique took a sip of her champagne, her eyes dancing with malice. "The condition is that you pay for it," my father said. I raised an eyebrow. "You want me to pay for the party?" "Not just pay for it," my mother interjected, leaning forward. "We want the best. We want the grand ballroom at the Piedmont Driving Club. We want the platinum package, imported lobster, vintage Dom Perignon, a 12-piece jazz orchestra. The quote came in this morning. It is $50,000. $50,000, I said, slowly testing the weight of the number. "That is the price of your re-entry into this family," Hunter said smugly. "You have the money. We saw your bank statements. You are sitting on millions while your parents struggle. If you want to be forgiven, if you want us to ever speak to you again, you will write that check. You will sponsor the event, and you will do it with a smile." I looked at them. They were truly incredible. They had just stolen $200,000 from the bank, which they were planning to hoard for themselves, and now they wanted to squeeze another $50,000 out of me just to punish me. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to keep their stolen loot and make me pay for the celebration of their fraud. Dominique spoke up, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Think of it as an apology tax, Aaliyah. You hurt us. You embarrassed us. This is how you make it right. You pay for the party, and we will let you sit at the head table. We will even let you take a family photo with us." I looked at the floor for a moment, pretending to consider it. I let my shoulders slump slightly, as if the weight of their disapproval was finally crushing me. I needed them to believe I was breaking. I needed them to believe that despite my money, I was still the desperate little girl craving their validation. I took a deep breath and looked up at my father. "You are right," I said softly. The room exhaled. I saw the tension leave my mother's shoulders. I saw the triumphant grin spread across Hunter's face. "I have been selfish." I continued, lying through my teeth with the skill of a seasoned actor. "I have been so focused on my work and my money that I forgot what matters. I forgot that family comes first. I do not want to be estranged. I do not want to be alone." My mother let out a small sob of relief. "Oh, Aaliyah, finally, finally you are making sense." "I will pay for the party," I said. "I will cover everything. The $50,000, the lobster, the champagne. I will transfer the funds directly to the venue tomorrow morning. You won't have to worry about a single dime." My father nodded, stroking his chin. "Good. That is good. That is the right decision." But I added, raising a finger, "I have one condition of my own." The air in the room tightened again. Dominique narrowed her eyes. "What condition?" she asked sharply. "If I am paying for this event," I said, "if I am sponsoring this celebration of our family legacy, I want to give a speech." "A speech?" my mother asked suspiciously. "Yes," I said, "a special toast. I want to stand up in front of all your friends, all the business partners, the entire church congregation, and I want to tell them the truth about how much this family means to me. I want to publicly honor you, Mom and Dad. I want to talk about the sacrifices that were made to get us here. I want to acknowledge Dominique and Hunter and everything they have done." I watched them process this. They were narcissists. To a narcissist, the promise of public adoration is like heroin. They imagined me standing on stage, crying, apologizing, singing their praises. They imagined me validating their lies in front of the people they wanted to impress. Hunter looked at Dominique and shrugged. "I do not see a problem with that. As long as you keep it positive, as long as you do not try to make it about yourself. It won't be about me, I promised. It will be entirely about you. It will be a speech that no one will ever forget." My father smiled a genuine greedy smile. He stood up and walked over to me, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. "I am proud of you, Aaliyah. You are finally growing up. You are finally stepping into your role." Dominique raised her glass. "To the anniversary," she said. "To the Vance legacy." I stood up. "To the legacy," I echoed. I walked out of the house with their laughter ringing in my ears. As I closed the heavy front door, I heard my mother exclaim, $50,000. Otis, she's actually doing it. We can keep the loan money for the new Mercedes." They were celebrating. They thought they had manipulated me. They thought they had bullied the golden goose into laying one last egg. They had no idea that the check I was about to write for the venue was the down payment on their destruction. I got into my car and drove straight to my lawyer's office. It was late, but Weiss was waiting for me. He had the venue contract ready on his desk. "You are sure about this?" Aaliyah Weiss asked, looking at the $50,000 figure. "That is a lot of money to spend on a party for people who hate you." "It is not a party, Benjamin," I said, picking up the pen. "It is a venue. I am paying for a captive audience. I am paying for the highest resolution projector screen in Atlanta. And I am paying for the security team to make sure they cannot cut the power when I start talking." I signed the check. "Make sure the contract stipulates that I have total control over the audio-visual equipment," I told him. "And make sure the doors are locked from the outside once the presentation starts. I do not want anyone slipping out before the finale." Weiss took the check and slid it into an envelope. "You are terrifying," he said with a hint of admiration. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. The trap was set. They had the stolen money in their account, which was the bait. They had the party, which was the cage. And on Saturday night, I was going to walk onto that stage and slam the door shut. Dominique thought she had won. She thought she was the smart one. She thought that by forging a signature, she had secured her future. She did not understand that she had just handed me the hammer, and I was about to bring it down with the force of 3 years of silence. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. I worked with a video editor to compile the evidence. I synchronized the bank statements with the timeline of their lies. I overlaid the audio of Hunter threatening me. I added the security footage from the impound lot. It was a masterpiece of forensic storytelling. Meanwhile, my family was living in a fantasy. My mother sent me text messages about the dress code. She wanted me to wear something subdued so I would not outshine Dominique. She sent me a color palette. Beige. She wanted me to wear beige. I went to the most exclusive boutique in Atlanta and bought a dress that was the color of blood red wine. It was structured sharp and impossible to ignore. I was not going there to blend in. I was going there to stand out. Friday night, I sat in my penthouse overlooking the city. I could see the lights of Buckhead in the distance. I wondered if they were sleeping well. I wondered if they had any inkling of what was coming. Probably not. Arrogance is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs you to danger until it is too late. I received one final text from Dominique at midnight. Just so you know, Mom and Dad want me to review your speech before you give it. Send me a draft in the morning. I laughed out loud in the empty apartment. I typed back a single sentence. It is a surprise. You will love it. I turned off my phone. I poured myself a glass of wine. And I waited for the sun to rise on the day of the golden anniversary, the day the Vance family name would burn to the ground, and from the ashes I would finally be free. The stage was set. The players were in position, and I was ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The $50,000 was a small price to pay for justice. After all, revenge is a dish best served with lobster and vintage champagne. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in forensic destruction. While my family was busy getting spray tans and manicures for their big night, I was sitting in a dimly lit office in downtown Atlanta across from a man named Marcus. Marcus was a private investigator who charged $400 an hour, and he was worth every penny. He had spent the last week digging into the lives of Dominique and Hunter, and what he placed on the desk between us was not just dirt, it was nuclear waste. I picked up the first folder. It was labeled Dominique. You know, Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair, your sister is not very good at covering her tracks. She treats the family trust account like a personal piggy bank, but she is sloppy. She thinks labeling a transaction as business development hides where the money actually goes. I opened the file. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. They showed Dominique entering a luxury apartment complex in Midtown. Not once or twice, but 3 times a week. The timestamp on the photos often coincided with times she claimed to be in board meetings or negotiating with suppliers. Who lives there? I asked, scanning the images. Marcus slid a second photo across the desk. It was a picture of a young man, probably 22 years old, leaving the same apartment. He was wearing gym clothes and carrying a protein shake. His name is Trey, Marcus said. He is an aspiring fitness influencer. Dominique pays the rent on that apartment. She also pays for his car note, his gym membership, and according to these Venmo transactions, she sends him $2,000 a month for protein and supplements. I felt a wave of nausea. My sister, who had spent years lecturing me about responsibility, who had called me a failure while I paid her bills, was using my hard-earned money to keep a boyfriend on the side. She was playing the role of the devoted wife to Hunter, while bankrolling a college dropout with the funds she stole from our parents' retirement. It gets better, Marcus said, pointing to a spreadsheet. Look at the dates. See that withdrawal for $5,000 on Valentine's Day? She told your parents that was for a business license renewal. It was actually for a weekend trip to Miami. Trey posted photos of them on his private Instagram. I looked at the screenshots Marcus had printed out. There was Dominique wearing a bikini I had paid for, holding a drink I had paid for, draped over a boy who was barely legal. The caption read, "Sugar Mama taking care of business." I closed the file. It was disgusting, but it was exactly what I needed. Dominique wasn't just a thief. She was a hypocrite of the highest order. What about Hunter? I asked. Is he just the victim here? Marcus laughed a dry, humorless sound. Hunter. No. Hunter is in a league of his own. Open the blue folder. I opened the blue folder. The first thing I saw was a copy of a birth certificate. The child's name was Jackson. He was 4 years old. He lived in Macon, Georgia. The father listed on the certificate was Hunter Vance. I stared at the paper, my hand trembling slightly. Hunter had a secret child. He has been paying child support under the table, Marcus explained. He categorizes it in his business ledger as consulting fees to a shell company in Macon, but I tracked the shell company. It is registered to the mother of the child. He sends her $1,500 a month. That is why he is always broke, Aaliyah. He is supporting a second family while pretending to be a childless power couple with your sister. The irony was suffocating. Dominique was cheating on Hunter. Hunter was hiding a child from Dominique. And both of them were using my money, and my parents' stolen equity to fund their double lives. They were a house of cards built on a foundation of lies, and I was holding the leaf blower. I looked at Marcus. Do you have the video evidence? He nodded, handing me a USB drive. Everything is on there. The footage of Dominique with Trey, the surveillance of Hunter visiting the child in Macon last month, the audio recording of Hunter arguing with the mother about missed payments. It is all there. I took the drive. It felt heavy in my hand. This was the ammunition I needed. Thank you, Marcus, I said, standing up. Send the bill to my LLC. I left his office and drove straight to see Weiss, my lawyer. The financial side of things needed to be just as watertight as the personal side. Weiss had been working with a forensic accountant to trace the flow of the fraudulent loan my parents had just taken out. When I walked into Weiss's conference room, the whiteboard was covered in diagrams. Red lines connected bank accounts, shell companies, and wire transfers. It is worse than we thought, Weiss said, skipping the pleasantries. They didn't just spend the $200,000 on the party, they are moving money offshore. Offshore? I asked, sitting down. Hunter set up an account in the Cayman Islands, Weiss explained, tapping a section of the board. He wired $50,000 there yesterday morning. He thinks he is being clever, hiding assets in case the bankruptcy hits. But he used the house Wi-Fi to do it. We have the IP logs, that is wire fraud and money laundering. And the IRS, I asked. Weiss smiled. I spoke with my contact in the Criminal Investigation Division. Given the amount of unreported income Dominique has claimed, and the fraudulent loan application, they are very interested. They are sending 2 agents to the party tomorrow night. They will be waiting in the parking lot until your presentation is over. I felt a cold, grim satisfaction. It was perfect. They wouldn't just be humiliated, they would be arrested. I went home to my penthouse and locked the door. I had work to do. I poured myself a strong coffee and sat down at my triple-monitor workstation. It was time to build the presentation. My mother had asked for a tribute. She wanted a slideshow that celebrated the Vance legacy. She wanted to see photos of her and Otis building their life, photos of Dominique winning awards, photos of the happy family. I opened PowerPoint. I started with the template they had sent me. It was gold and white, elegant and pretentious. Slide 1, the title slide, 30 Years of Excellence. A photo of Mom and Dad cutting their wedding cake. Slide 2. A photo of us as children playing in the yard. Slide 3. Dominique's college graduation photo. I built the first 5 minutes exactly as they wanted. It was sentimental. It was touching. It was the bait. I added their favorite gospel song as the background music. I timed the transitions perfectly. If they watched this, they would cry tears of joy. Then I created a transition, a black screen that lasted for 5 seconds, and then the real show began. I dragged the files from Marcus's USB drive into the timeline. Slide 10. The heading read, Where the Money Really Goes. I inserted the photos of Dominique and Trey in Miami. I overlaid the bank statements showing the withdrawals from the family trust on the same dates. I used a red circle to highlight the transaction descriptions, business development juxtaposed with the image of her buying shots at a club. Slide 11. The heading read, The Consultant. I inserted the birth certificate of Hunter's son. I added the photo of Hunter holding the child in a park in Macon. I added the audio clip of him screaming at the mother. I typed out the transcript of the call where he said, "I do not care if the kid needs braces. Tell him to wait until my wife's idiot sister sends the check." I replayed that audio clip 3 times, making sure the volume was leveled to fill a ballroom. Slide 12. The heading read, "The Theft." I inserted the forensic accounting diagrams Weiss had given me. I showed the forged signature on the loan application side by side with my father's real signature. I showed the wire transfer to the Cayman Islands. I put a big bold graphic showing the exact amount of money they had stolen from Otis and Patricia Vance. Slide 13. The finale. I simply put a screenshot of the eviction notice I had filed that morning, the notice that gave them 30 days to vacate the property for non-payment of rent. And next to it, I put the deed to the house with my name, Aaliyah Vance, listed as the owner of the debt. I watched the entire presentation from start to finish. It was 18 minutes long. The first 5 minutes were love. The last 13 minutes were war. I saved the file as anniversary tribute final.ptx. I saved it to 3 different USB drives. I emailed a copy to myself. I uploaded a copy to a cloud server that I could access from my phone. There would be no technical difficulties. There would be no lost files. I sat back in my chair and looked out at the city. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a soldier the night before the battle. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dominique. "Make sure you include that photo of me accepting the Chamber of Commerce award. And do not make the music too loud during my section." I picked up the phone and typed back, "Do not worry, everyone will hear you loud and clear." I went to my closet and pulled out the dress I had bought. The red dress. I hung it on the door frame. It looked like a suit of armor. Tomorrow night, I wasn't just Aaliyah the scapegoat. I wasn't Aaliyah the ATM machine. I was the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep much. I lay there thinking about the little girl I used to be. The girl who just wanted her mother to look at her the way she looked at Dominique. The girl who tried to buy love with obedience and then with money. That girl was gone. She had died the moment Hunter threatened to smash her computer. The woman who replaced her didn't want love. She wanted the truth. And the truth was sitting on a USB drive, ready to be projected onto a 20-foot screen in front of 300 of Atlanta's finest. The sun rose on Saturday morning, bright and unforgiving. I showered, put on my makeup with the precision of a surgeon, and zipped up the red dress. I looked in the mirror. "Showtime," I whispered. I grabbed the USB drives and walked out the door. The drive to the country club felt like a funeral procession, but the funeral wasn't for me. It was for the Vance family reputation, and I was the one delivering the eulogy. The Piedmont Driving Club is an institution in Atlanta. It is the kind of place where the walls are lined with oil paintings of men who owned railroads, and the air smells of beeswax polish and old money. For my parents, securing the grand ballroom for their 30th anniversary was not just a party choice. It was a tactical maneuver. They needed to remind the city that the Vance family was still relevant, still powerful, and most importantly, still solvent. I arrived exactly 15 minutes early. I wanted to be part of the scenery before the play began. I stood near the bar, nursing a glass of sparkling water, wearing the red dress that fit me like a second skin. It was a deep blood crimson, a sharp contrast to the sea of pastels and creams that the guests were wearing. My mother had asked for beige. She had asked for me to fade into the background. But tonight I was the siren, and the ship was heading straight for the rocks. The room filled up quickly. The cream of Atlanta society poured in, bringing with them the low hum of gossip. I could hear snippets of conversation as people passed me. They were whispering about the incident at the church. They were whispering about the rumors of foreclosure. But as soon as they saw the sheer scale of the event, the whispers changed tone. "Look at the flowers," I heard Mrs. Gable say, touching a massive arrangement of white orchids that I had paid for that morning. "They must have flown these in from Holland. I suppose the rumors were exaggerated. You do not throw a party like this if you are broke. That was the magic of money. It was the ultimate concealer. It could hide sins, it could hide incompetence, and it could hide the fact that the hosts were standing on a trap door. Then she entered. Dominique did not just walk into a room, she made an entrance. She paused at the top of the double staircase waiting for heads to turn. And they did. She was wearing a gown that was nothing short of spectacular. It was a shimmering gold sequined masterpiece with a train that trailed 3 feet behind her. It was the kind of dress that belonged on a red carpet in Hollywood, not a country club in Georgia. I knew exactly how much it cost, because I had seen the transaction alert on the stolen credit card statement. $10,000. She had charged it yesterday along with a pair of Jimmy Choo heels and a diamond clutch. She stood there bathed in the warm light of the chandeliers, looking like a golden statue of success. Hunter stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo with a black lapel. He looked polished, handsome, and completely devoid of the desperation that had consumed him in my office just days ago. They descended the stairs together, smiling and waving as if they were royalty greeting their subjects. My parents were waiting at the bottom, beaming with pride. My mother rushed forward to embrace Dominique, making sure to do it in the center of the room, where everyone could see. "My beautiful girl," I heard my mother exclaim, her voice carrying over the jazz band. "You have outdone yourself. This is magnificent." Dominique laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Only the best for you, Mom. You and Dad deserve the world. I just wanted to give you a night you would never forget." I took a sip of my water. Oh, she was right about that. They would never forget this night, but not for the reasons she thought. I watched as Dominique began to work the room. She was in her element. She moved from group to group, accepting compliments, flashing her whitened smile, and spinning lies with the grace of a spider spinning silk. I saw her approach Mrs. Johnson, the woman who had driven past them in the church parking lot. I moved slightly closer, pretending to examine the ice sculpture so I could hear the conversation. Mrs. Johnson Dominique cooed, taking the older woman's hands. "I am so glad you could make it. We missed you at the brunch last Sunday." Mrs. Johnson looked uncomfortable for a moment, glancing at Dominique's expensive dress, and then at the lavish buffet. "Well, yes. We were quite concerned, dear. We saw the unpleasantness with the truck." Dominique threw her head back and laughed. "Oh, that. Can you believe it? It was a total nightmare. Identity theft. Someone hacked our main accounts and triggered a security freeze. The bank froze everything, even the lease payments. It took our lawyers 48 hours to untangle it. We are actually suing the bank for the embarrassment. But as you can see, we are back on track." Mrs. Johnson nodded, her skepticism melting away under the heat of the expensive champagne and the gold dress. "Identity theft. That is terrible. I told Harold it had to be a mistake. The Vances do not get repossessed." "Exactly," Dominique said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "But honestly, it was a blessing in disguise. It reminded us that we need to be more careful with our security. We are moving so much capital these days that we are targets." I turned away, fighting the urge to vomit. It was masterful. She took the truth, her own poverty, and twisted it into a story about having too much money. The room continued to fill. The jazz band played smooth, inoffensive covers of Sinatra. Waiters circulated with trays of lobster tail and caviar blinis. Every bite of food, every drop of liquor, every flower petal was paid for by the check I had written. I was literally feeding the people who had come to celebrate my erasure. I felt a presence at my elbow. I didn't need to look to know who it was. The smell of expensive cologne masking the scent of fear was unmistakable. Hunter. He leaned against the pillar next to me, holding a glass of scotch. He didn't look at me. He looked out at the room, surveying the crowd with a smug satisfaction. "Nice dress, Aaliyah," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "A little loud for a support act. Do not you think Mom specifically said beige?" I looked at him. I wore red because it is festive, Hunter. It is a celebration, isn't it? Hunter chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. It certainly is. Look at this. Look at them. They love us. They respect us. This is what winning looks like. He turned to face me, then a smirk playing on his lips. I have to admit, I was worried you wouldn't cough up the cash. I thought you might actually have a backbone. But I guess deep down you are still just the little sister who wants to sit at the grown-up table. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. Thanks for the party, Cinderella. You really came through. The lobster is excellent. I hope you saved enough of your little savings to pay your rent this month. Because once this night is over, we are done with you. We have our own funding now. We do not need your charity anymore. I looked him in the eye. He was so confident. He truly believed that the fraudulent loan was a permanent solution. He believed that stealing $200,000 was a business strategy. You are welcome, Hunter, I said calmly. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I wanted to make sure you had exactly the audience you deserve. He frowned slightly, sensing something in my tone that didn't quite fit his narrative of victory. But he dismissed it quickly. Arrogance always dismisses warning signs. Just remember your place during the speech, he warned. Keep it short. Keep it sweet. Do not try to steal the spotlight. This is Dominique's night. She is the one who saved the family image. You are just the wallet. He patted me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be patronizing. Know your role, Aaliyah. Be a good girl, and maybe we will let you come to Christmas. He walked away, adjusting his tuxedo jacket, heading back to Dominique's side. I watched him go. I watched him slide his arm around my sister. I watched them pose for a photographer, the flash illuminating their fake smiles. They looked perfect. They looked untouchable. I scanned the room again. This time I looked toward the back near the heavy double doors that led to the exit. Standing in the shadows away from the bar and the buffet were two men. They were wearing suits that were ill-fitting and cheap. They weren't drinking. They weren't smiling. They were watching the room with the practiced boredom of law enforcement. I met the eyes of the taller man. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The IRS agents had arrived, and near the AV booth I saw Marcus, my private investigator. He was leaning against the wall, checking his watch. He saw me and gave me a thumbs up. The trap was fully set, the doors were guarded, the evidence was loaded, and the victims were currently toasting each other with vintage champagne. The jazz band finished their set. The room grew quieter as the master of ceremonies, a local news anchor my parents had hired, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC boomed, his voice smooth and professional. If we could all take our seats. Dinner is about to be served. But first, we have a very special presentation, a tribute to 30 years of love, sacrifice, and legacy. The lights in the ballroom began to dim. The chatter died down. 300 faces turned toward the massive screen that descended from the ceiling. Hunter and Dominique sat at the head table right in the center. They held hands. They looked at the screen with anticipation, expecting to see a montage of their glory. They expected to see the lie they had carefully constructed, projected 20 feet high. I walked toward the stage. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. The spotlight found me. The red dress blazed in the darkness. I stepped up to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw my mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, ready to be moved. I saw my father puffing on a cigar, ready to be honored. I saw Hunter raising his glass to me in a mocking toast. I took a deep breath. Good evening, everyone, I said, my voice steady and clear. My name is Aaliyah Vance. I am the daughter you rarely see, the sister you rarely hear from, and tonight I have been asked to pay tribute to, this incredible family. There was a ripple of polite laughter. Hunter smiled. He thought I was sticking to the script. I looked down at the laptop connected to the podium. My finger hovered over the space bar. They say the truth shall set you free, I said into the microphone. But first, it is going to make you very, very uncomfortable. I pressed the button. The screen behind me flared to life. The music started. It was the gospel song they wanted. The first slide was the wedding photo. I saw Dominique relax. I saw Hunter lean back in his chair. I counted down in my head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I pressed the button for the transition. The music cut out abruptly. The beautiful wedding photo dissolved into a stark black screen. And then the audio of Hunter's voice filled the room. Not the polished voice from earlier, but a grainy, angry recording from a phone call. I do not care if the kid needs braces. Tell him to wait until my wife's idiot sister sends the check. The room gasped. It was a collective sound like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the ballroom. Hunter dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. I looked at him. I smiled. Welcome to the real anniversary party, I thought. I hope you enjoyed the lobster, because the bill has finally come due. The spotlight was hot against my skin, blindingly bright, creating a wall of white light that separated me from the rest of the room. I stood at the podium, gripping the sides of the lacquered wood, feeling the hum of the microphone under my fingertips. For a moment, the only sound I could hear was the beat of my own heart, steady and slow like a war drum. Out in the darkness, beyond the glare, I knew my family was watching. I knew Dominique was holding Hunter's hand, her face plastered with that practiced pageant queen smile. I knew my mother was clutching her handkerchief, ready to dab away tears of performative joy. They were waiting for a tribute. They were waiting for me to bow down and worship the false idols they had built. I leaned into the microphone. My voice echoed through the massive ballroom, crisp and clear, amplified by the expensive sound system I had paid for. We are here tonight to talk about legacy, I began. My parents, Otis and Patricia Vance, have spent 30 years building a name. They have taught us that appearance is everything. They have taught us that the truth is flexible as long as the neighbors are impressed. And tonight they asked me to share the reality of what it takes to maintain the Vance family lifestyle. I paused. I saw my father nod approvingly in the front row. He thought I was talking about hard work. He thought I was talking about his banking career. I reached out and pressed the spacebar on the laptop. Behind me, the 20-foot screen flickered. The beautiful sepia-toned photo of my parents' wedding day dissolved. The room went dark for a split second, a heavy, pregnant pause that made the air thicken. Then the screen exploded with light again. But this time there were no smiles. There were no flowers. The image on the screen was a scanned document. It was blown up so large that even the people in the back row could read the fine print. It was a birth certificate. Name of child Jackson. Place of birth, Macon, Georgia. Father Hunter Vance. A ripple of confusion moved through the room. It started as a low murmur like the sound of wind through trees, and then it sharpened into distinct whispers. I saw heads turn. I saw Mrs. Johnson lean forward, squinting at the screen. Then I hit the next button. The audio file played. It was Hunter's voice, not the smooth, charming voice he used at parties, but the raw, angry bark of a man cornered. The sound filled the ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. I do not care if the kid needs braces. Tell him to wait until my wife's idiot sister sends the check. I am not made of money. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. I looked down at the front table. Hunter had frozen. His glass was halfway to his mouth, his face drained of all color. Dominique had dropped her hand from his arm, as if he were radioactive. I spoke again, my voice calm, almost conversational. That was the voice of Hunter Vance, our beloved son-in-law. The man who lectures me on family values. The man who claims to be a business mogul. As you can see, his most successful investment is a second family in Macon that he supports using funds stolen from this family. I clicked the button again. The screen changed. Now it showed a split screen. On the left, a series of bank transfers labeled Business Development. On the right, photos from a private Instagram account. Photos of Dominique, my sister, the golden child. But she wasn't in a boardroom. She was in a nightclub in Miami. She was on a boat. and she was wrapped in the arms of a boy who looked young enough to be her son. I pointed to the screen. My sister tells you she is a CEO. She tells you she is closing deals. But as these time-stamped photos show, while she was supposed to be in negotiations in Tokyo, she was actually funding the lifestyle of a 22-year-old personal trainer named Trey. And she was doing it with money from the Vance family trust. The gasp from the audience was audible now. It was a wave of shock. Someone in the back shouted, "Oh my God!" My mother let out a small strangled cry, but she didn't move. She was paralyzed. I continued, relentless. I was not letting them look away. You might be wondering where all this money comes from. After all, Dominique's business records, which I am projecting now, show that her company has not turned a profit in 5 years. In fact, it is a pyramid scheme that is currently under investigation. I clicked again. A spreadsheet appeared. It showed red lines, negative balances, debt. So how do they afford the cars, the clothes, the country club memberships? How do they afford the $9,000 a month that keeps my parents from bankruptcy? I looked directly at my father. He was staring at me, his mouth open, his cigar fallen to the floor. They told you that money came from Dominique, I said. They told you I was the failure, the freelancer, the disappointment. I clicked the button. The screen changed to a bank statement. It was my bank statement. The header read, Aaliyah Vance, LLC. Net income $600,000. I highlighted the recurring transfer. $9,000 sent every month to the Vance Family Trust. That money is mine, I said. I am a ghostwriter. I have written 3 New York Times bestsellers for clients you all know and admire. Every single dollar that has kept the lights on in the Vance mansion for the last 3 years came from my keyboard. It came from the daughter you shunned. The daughter you told to sit at the kids' table. I saw the realization hit the room. The guests were looking from me to my parents with a mixture of horror and pity. The facade was crumbling. The lies were dissolving in the harsh light of the projector. But I wasn't done. I had one final nail for the coffin. I looked at Dominique. She was shaking now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She looked small. She looked guilty. Stealing credit is one thing, I said, but stealing a home is another. I clicked the final slide. It showed 2 documents side by side. On the left, a home equity line of credit application dated 3 days ago. On the right, my father's driver's license signature. I zoomed in on the signatures. This is a loan application for $200,000 against the equity in my parents' house, I explained. It was submitted electronically at 2 in the morning from the IP address of the Vance family home. As you can see, the signature on the application does not match my father's handwriting. It is a forgery. I paused, letting the word hang in the air. Forgery. My sister and her husband forged my father's signature to steal the last bit of equity in his home. They committed federal wire fraud and bank fraud to pay for this party, to pay for the lobster you are eating, to pay for the champagne in your glasses. I saw Hunter stand up. He looked wild, frantic. That is a lie, he screamed, his voice cracking. She doctored those photos. She is crazy. I looked at the back of the room. The 2 men in the cheap suits stepped forward. They weren't looking at the screen. They were looking at Hunter. And there is one last detail, I said, delivering the final blow. They thought they were stealing from the bank, but they didn't know that the bank had already sold the debt. I clicked one last time. The screen showed a property deed. The owner of the lien was listed clearly, Aaliyah Vance, LLC. I bought the mortgage note last week, I said. I am the lender, I am the landlord, and as of this morning I have filed for foreclosure. The room erupted. It was chaos. People were standing up, knocking over chairs. Waiters were dropping trays. The hum of gossip turned into a roar of judgment. My mother stood up. She looked at the screen. She looked at the proof of her daughter's betrayal, her son-in-law's infidelity, and her own financial ruin. She looked at me standing on stage in my red dress, the architect of her destruction. She tried to speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hand fluttered to her chest. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Patricia, My father screamed. My mother collapsed. She went down like a stone, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. It wasn't a fake faint. It wasn't a performance. It was the physical shutdown of a woman whose entire reality had just been obliterated. People rushed to her. Someone yelled, "Call 911." My father was on his knees beside her, slapping her cheeks, crying. Dominique was sobbing hysterically, but she didn't move to help her mother. She was too busy trying to hide her face from the cameras that were now pointed at her. Because that was the other thing. Everyone had their phones out. The entire room was recording. I stood at the podium and watched. I didn't rush down. I didn't offer help. There were doctors in the room. There were people who cared. I wasn't one of them anymore. I looked at Hunter. He was trying to back away toward the exit, but the two IRS agents were blocking his path. I saw one of them flash a badge. I saw the color drain from Hunter's face completely. He looked back at me, his eyes full of hate and fear. I gave him a small wave. "Aaliyah," my father yelled from the floor, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Help us! How could you do this?" I leaned into the microphone one last time. "I didn't do this, Dad," I said softly. "You did. You chose the lie." I just turned on the lights. I stepped back from the podium. The screen behind me was still glowing, projecting the image of my ownership over their lives. I walked down the stairs of the stage, careful not to trip on my dress. The crowd parted for me. They looked at me with fear, with awe, with respect. No one dared to speak to me. No one dared to criticize me. I walked through the chaos, past the fainting mother, past the arrested brother-in-law, past the crying sister. I walked straight to the exit. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped out onto the terrace. I could hear the sirens in the distance coming closer. I took a deep breath. It smelled like rain and victory. I walked to the valet stand and handed the attendant my ticket. "My G-Wagon, please," I said. As I waited for my car, I could still hear the commotion inside. The house of Vance had fallen, and I was the only one walking away from the rubble. The ballroom was a cacophony of shattered illusions. The air once filled with the smooth notes of jazz, and the polite murmur of high society was now thick with the sounds of chaos. Chairs were overturned. Crystal glasses lay broken on the hardwood floor, their expensive contents seeping into the varnish. And in the center of it all, my sister and her husband were being dismantled piece by piece. I stood near the exit, my arms crossed, watching the finale of the play I had orchestrated. The two men in the cheap suits, the IRS agents who had been waiting in the shadows like vultures, moved with terrifying efficiency. They did not shout. They did not make a scene. They simply cut through the panicked crowd and boxed Hunter in against the head table. Hunter tried to run. It was a pathetic, reflexive movement, a stumble backward into a waiter carrying a tray of half-eaten lobster. The tray crashed to the ground, splattering butter sauce onto Hunter's midnight blue tuxedo. He slipped in the mess, his arms flailing, and before he could regain his balance, the agents were on him. "Hunter Vance," one agent said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and money laundering." "No," Hunter screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal. "This is a mistake. My wife handles the finances. I didn't sign anything." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. It was a mechanical final sound that signaled the end of his career, his marriage, and his freedom. Dominique was standing a few feet away, her hands pressed over her mouth. Her gold-sequined dress, the one that cost $10,000 of stolen money, shimmered under the ballroom lights. When the second agent turned toward her, she let out a wail that sounded less like grief and more like a tantrum. "Mrs. Vance," the agent said calmly, "we have a warrant for your arrest as a co-conspirator. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." "Me!" Dominique shrieked, backing away until she hit the edge of the stage. "I am the victim here. He did it. He made me sign I am a Vance. You cannot arrest me at my parents' anniversary party." The agent didn't care about her last name. He didn't care about the party. He spun her around efficiently. The cold steel of the cuffs snapped onto her wrists, pinning her arms behind her back. The gold sequins scratched against the metal. My mother, Patricia, was still on the floor being fanned by Mrs. Johnson. She had regained consciousness just in time to see her golden child being marched out of the room in shackles. She let out a low moan and covered her eyes, unable to face the reality of her daughter's disgrace. But my father Otis was not looking at them. He was looking at me. He pushed his way through the crowd, his face a mask of purple rage and sheer terror. He stumbled over the broken glass, not caring that he was ruining his shoes. He marched right up to me, stopping only inches from my face. I could smell the stale cigar smoke and the fear on his breath. "You Otis," hissed, shaking a finger in my face. "You did this. You stood up there and you destroyed us. You destroyed the Vance name." I looked at him calmly. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. "I told the truth, Dad," I said. "The Vance name was already destroyed. It was destroyed when your daughter stole your retirement. It was destroyed when your son-in-law forged your signature. All I did was show you the receipts." Otis grabbed his hair, pulling at the gray strands. "Receipts. You call this receipts. You just had your sister arrested. Do you know what this means? Do you know what happens on Monday? The news will have a field day. We will be pariahs." He looked around the room at the guests who were hurriedly leaving, whispering behind their hands. "And the house," Otis wailed, his voice rising to a panic. "Did you hear what you said up there? You said the house is in foreclosure. You said the bank sold the debt." He grabbed my shoulders, his grip painful. "Tell me that was a lie, Aaliyah. Tell me you just made that up for the slideshow. Tell me we still have a home." I looked down at his hands until he let go. I reached into my small clutch purse and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a slide this time. It was the original deed, stamped and notarized by the county clerk that morning. I unfolded it and held it up for him to see. "It wasn't a lie, Dad." Otis squinted at the paper. He read the legal description of the property. He read the lien holder information. Aaliyah Vance, LLC. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with confusion and horror. You own the debt. I bought the non-performing note from the bank 3 days ago," I explained, my voice steady. When Dominique stopped paying the mortgage to fund her lifestyle, the bank classified it as a toxic asset. They were going to auction the house off next week to a developer who planned to bulldoze it. I stepped in. I paid off the arrears, and I bought the mortgage. Otis let out a breath of relief. Oh, thank God. You bought it, so it stays in the family." He tried to smile, a weak, trembling thing. That is good, Aaliyah. That is smart. You saved the house. We can fix this. We will get Dominique a lawyer, we will explain everything, and we will keep the house. You are a good daughter. I knew you wouldn't let your parents be homeless." I folded the document and put it back in my purse. "I am not letting you be homeless, Dad. But you are confused about one thing." "What?" Otis asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I didn't buy the house to save it for the family," I said. "I bought it as an investment property." Otis froze. "Investment?" "Yes." I continued, keeping my tone professional, like a landlord speaking to a tenant. "You see, since the mortgage hasn't been paid in 6 months, I have legally foreclosed on the property. The title has transferred to my LLC. It is no longer your house, Otis. It is my house." Otis stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But we live there." "I know," I said. "And I am willing to let you stay. I know how hard it is to find housing in Atlanta with a foreclosure on your record and no retirement savings. So I have drawn up a lease agreement." "Lease?" Otis whispered. You want to lease my own house back to me?" "My house," I corrected gently. "And yes, I have calculated the market rate for a property of that size in Buckhead. It usually goes for about $6,000 a month. But since you are family, and since I know you are on a fixed income now that Dominique has drained your savings, I am willing to offer you a friends and family discount." I paused, letting the numbers hang in the air. $3,500 a month, I said. Otis looked like he had been slapped. 3,500. "Aaliyah, That is my entire pension check. How are we supposed to eat? How are we supposed to live? That is something you will have to figure out, I said. Maybe Mom can get a job. I hear the grocery store is hiring baggers. Or maybe you can sell some of the furniture. I do not care how you come up with the money, Dad, but rent is due on the 1st. If it is late, there is a 5% fee. If it is late twice, I will file for eviction. You wouldn't? Otis gasped. You wouldn't evict your own parents. I looked over his shoulder at the exit where the police were currently shoving Dominique into the back of a squad car. Her screams were muffled by the glass. I just sent my sister to federal prison, Dad, I said coldly. Do not test me. Otis slumped. He looked broken. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him for 30 years had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened old man. Why, he whispered. Why are you doing this? Because for 30 years you made me feel like a tenant in my own family, I said. You made me pay for your love. You made me earn my place. Now you are going to learn what it actually feels like to pay for your place. I turned to walk away. I was done. There was nothing left to say. Wait, Otis called out. Where are you going? You cannot leave us here. We do not have a car. The Porsche. The police took the keys. I stopped and looked back. Uber is a great app, Dad. You should download it, but be careful with the surge pricing. It is a Saturday night. I walked out onto the terrace. The night air was cool and clean. The chaos of the ballroom faded behind me. I walked down the stone steps toward the valet stand, my red dress flowing around me like a victory flag. Standing next to my matte black G-Wagon was a figure in a floral coat. Grandma Hattie. She was leaning against the hood of my truck, holding her purse in one hand and a cane in the other, though she clearly didn't need it. She was grinning from ear to ear. I saw the whole thing from the balcony, Hattie said as I approached. She cackled a sound of pure delight. Lord have mercy, child. When those handcuffs clicked, I thought Mrs. Johnson was going to swallow her false teeth. I smiled, the first genuine smile I had felt all day. Did you see Dad's face? Hattie nodded, opening the passenger door. I saw it. He looked like a man who just realized he bet on the wrong horse. $3,500 a month. You are ruthless. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The dashboard lit up, glowing soft and welcoming. I learned from the best, I said, looking over at her. Hattie buckled her seatbelt. So what is the plan now? Are we going back to the penthouse? I put the truck in gear. The powerful engine purred. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw the lights of the country club. I saw the flashing blue lights of the police cars. I saw the ruins of the Vance dynasty. No, I said. I think we need a vacation. I was thinking Bali. I hear the beaches are beautiful this time of year, and since I do not have to pay for a criminal defense attorney or a $50,000 party ever again, I think I can afford first class. Hattie laughed, settling back into the leather seat. Bali sounds nice. Do they have good coffee? The best, I promised. I drove out of the parking lot, past the gawking guests, past the police, past the misery. I turned onto the main road and accelerated. I didn't look back. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. My parents had their legacy. It was a legacy of debt, shame, and a lease agreement with their landlord daughter. I had my truth. And my truth was expensive, hard-earned, and exclusively mine. As we merged onto the highway heading toward a future that finally belonged to me, I turned up the music. It wasn't jazz. It wasn't gospel. It was loud, heavy bass that rattled the windows. It was the sound of silence ending. The greatest lesson this journey taught me is that you cannot buy respect from people committed to misunderstanding you. For years, I believed my financial support would earn my place in the family, but it only funded their disrespect. True freedom arrived the moment I realized my worth was not a negotiable currency. We must understand that shared DNA is not a license for abuse, and setting boundaries is an act of survival, not cruelty. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is fire your family and hire your peace of mind. If this story inspired you to stand up for yourself, please hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away to find your happiness?